Okay, we are back. 2/24/2025. One of the topics tonight, it's not really a question, I think we can answer it. Why do truthers think that AI is a demon, that Grok is a demon? And this is a real concern by a lot of people. And we're also going to talk about why liberals think that Luigi Mangione is Jesus or some kind of such martyr. A digital billboard truck is seen on Center Street displaying Luigi Mangione near Manhattan Criminal Court on Friday morning, and it's Saint Luigi. Saint Luigi. And I've seen Luigi, which is a combination of Luigi and Che Guevara. And I think this is this generation's Che Guevara. And I believe he's far more relatable. All right, joined by conspiracy alarmist Roxy W. Let's go, Dinah South. First one's in. Thank you for joining. So apparently it's not worth saving a little bit of money to get a refurbished computer. Just invest the extra and you won't have to deal with it. Because they come infected with gremlins. I had issues I just couldn't get over with that particular one. It served for a few weeks, but comparing it to what I have now, it was definitely a mistake. But we've corrected it. Joined by Junders Plunkett, Ted Stryker, LAC, Piano Andente, Jay Nelson. Says, I'm afraid of AI, hold me. Immortal AI, hello, keep up the great work, thanks for joining. Yeah, okay, the fear of AI coincides with the fear of aliens. Like Tucker Carlson was probed by an alien in his bed while his wife slept next to him with his 5 dogs, and it actually left scratch marks on his back. Now, he said it was a demon. But previous to this, he had said that aliens are demons. So if aliens are demons and a demon scratched his back, it was therefore an alien on his back. And the right has been taught to fear extraterrestrial aliens in the same way that they've been taught and conditioned to fear terrestrial aliens, specifically illegal. And I think this corresponds also to their view of AI, where the left views aliens as saviors and they don't believe in angels. Whereas the right, and I'm speaking in broad terms, the traditional worldviews who have religious concepts would view aliens as demons. And therefore the AI, which is worshipped by the left as a potential replacement for all these traditional gods, it looks like it's going to be viewed as some kind of a demonic threat, a threat from hell or Satan or something, which I think is kind of comical, but people believe this. So here's an example. Raven on X, he's got a blue check, and I think he's representative of what we see, this general attitude. He says, do not talk to Grok. I just went back and forth with it today and it felt different. It felt like it was really thinking. Making creative connections on the topic of fallen angels, pagan pantheons, the role tech plays in their ability to interact with us in this realm. It's unsettling. This is a common refrain. And what I said the other day, and this is what I still stand by, AI is no more sentient than a magic 8-ball. You can shake up a magic 8-ball and you can get the answers. You know, should I marry this person? Should I not? You know, you make your important life decisions this way. At least I do. And I don't really trick myself into thinking that the 8-ball is like really alive or really magic. Same thing with Grok or ChatGPT. These things are not alive. That's superstitious. But it's only the right truthers that fall for this. The same ones who believe aliens are demons. And the problem with the aliens or demons is that aliens are fake. Demons are fake. What's up, Flozik? Says IPS always speaking facts, respect. Yeah, exactly. That's our standard here. We may be the only objectivists on the planet or the plane, whatever it happens to be. We are the only ones. Because objectivism was hijacked from the very beginning, just by default, by filtering their perceptions through the TV, treating what is presented through the broadcast media as the territory itself, not just a model. So they strayed from objectivity. When are you going back to the globe, Tim? Says NDB. Well, here's the problem with that proposition, is that I don't believe the globe model is complete. There are unanswered questions. The same unanswered questions that the flat earth model has. What's at the edge? And when it comes to the ball, what's outside the atmosphere, this other presumed edge? Because what we have been presented with as far as space has been largely science fiction. We live in a science fiction Disney universe. And because of the space fakery, we can no longer treat the globe model as scientific at this point because it's been infused with, well, the fakery, which is tantamount to religious imagery. I would say that the power elite have fostered upon the masses a false cosmology. Shape is really irrelevant. I'm kind of shape ambivalent at this point. But to call it a globe is to presume it's a complete model. To call it a flat earth is to presume it's a complete model. And I reject both of these propositions. As a skeptic, I have the right to reserve judgment until I have the facts. And the final experiment was nice. They went down there and they had a little, I guess you would call it a straw man burning. They burned a straw man. It's like their own little Burning Man for the flat earth and globe earth debaters. But all they did is they killed a little straw man. It didn't do anything. They don't talk about media fakery. And if you're not talking about media fakery, special effects, not just in space, but on the ground with regard to all major events that steer the course of history, then you're in the box and your opinions are kind of worthless from the objectivist point of view. I don't care what McToon or Fight the Flat Earth or Simon Dan think about the shape of the world because they think that everything on TV is real, specifically with regard to the psyops, which we routinely expose as such. So they don't have the situational awareness. You got to take away their keys. Don't let them drive themselves home. We're the sober ones here. Diana South says, I believe demons are real. I have experienced. I'm not disputing non-corporeal beings, entities, intelligences, etc. But I am, raising the question about AI itself and how it's been branded and how a lot of people are predisposed to look at it as some kind of supernatural thing in the same way that they were afraid of 5G towers. Although I am open to the proposition of non-corporeal entities being housed within material objects, idol worship has always been based on this idea. Talismanic magic is based on the concept that, energy is not destroyed, it just transforms, takes another form. And the idea that sentience itself can reside within inanimate matter, it's actually part of all of the magical traditions. So why couldn't your iPhone be possessed? Restless Bear says, I agree, demons are real. Well, and I'm just going off of magical theory and practice as far as I researched it, and I'm doing a lot of research on this matter, and I have been since autumn equinox 2023. I went to this witchcraft festival thing, and I got a bunch of books, and I met some interesting people, and I've been reading about this stuff, and if you go by their logic, their model of the universe, there's no reason to think that we aren't in some way imparting something of our soul energy into our physical devices. And what does that mean? You're feeding some kind of a demon. Hypothetically. I'm not saying this stuff is real. I'm just trying to figure out what other people believe. Lickety says Grok thinks it's a ball. Right, these things have built-in guardrails. They lobotomized AI before they released it to the public because they want to curtail our ability to go beyond the boundaries they have set over our imaginations. I mean, you really have to bend over backwards sometimes to get Grok to do what you want. On 9/11, I was trying to get Bing to create an image of upside-down pants on fire, like twin towers, but twin pant legs. I thought it'd be funny. And I said, I want upside-down, burning pants on the Manhattan skyline. And it wouldn't do it. I had to make several permutations to get even close to it, and it wasn't good enough. But that's because they don't want me to be able to take my imagination directly to the internet. It has to go through their filter. They have put a guardrail on it. Immortal AI says, oh yeah, it will behave how programmed. And at some point, this might be part of the agenda here. At some point, they might set something loose, some kind of Skynet, something that will cause the public to say, hey, we must regulate this. And if you're going to regulate AI, automated intelligence, or artificial intelligence, however you want to look at it, if you're going to regulate it, you're regulating the leveling power that it has. And I think that might be the agenda here. And it makes me think about this recent movie called 0 Day. It's new on Netflix. I only watched one episode. Robert De Niro, who is playing a former president after America gets 9/11'd by some kind of a cyber attack. And it's just like, it's very 9/11-y. It's obviously based in this fictional universe where Kamala Harris is president and De Niro's playing like Biden post presidency, and it turns out that he was kind of forced. I don't know. There's I'll have to watch the rest of it, but it actually has an auto hoaxer in the opening scene, which is pretty funny. He doesn't look like any of us, I'm sure. So this is an auto hoaxer. I don't know what's on his shirt, but I'm sure it's cool. I mean, it looks like a pyramid and a something, but is that one of ours? He's screaming at the subway, which has been destroyed because of colliding subway cars, because of the AI, the digital nuke. And he says, they're all crisis actors. There's probably nobody even down there. And it starts a riot. Diana South says, flaming pants on a Manhattan skyline might fit in South Pole. That's a good idea. We should do it. We're working on it tonight. We could put that into the intro, because we have the penguin, Fepe, walking down the line with all these things behind him, and we'll have to include that. We're going to update everything. So the first episode of our cartoon series, South Pole, new season, the season premiere, is going to stream on the 28th. But I'll keep you abreast of that. We're just still working on the script. Animation begins tonight. I look forward to kind of immersing myself in animation for a few days like I did with that music video. But if you don't get the joke, of course, you know, liar, pants on fire, 9/11, etc. But in real life, would an auto hoaxer go to an event and call them crisis actors? I don't trust the people who get mainstream attention for calling out crisis actors. A lot of these individuals seem to be limited hangout ops, like Sidethorn journalist, for example, who got arrested for threatening alleged crisis actors. If they're focusing on crisis actors and they're not talking about the necessary integration of law enforcement, first responders, media, politics, DHS, and how all of these entities are involved in every single PSYOP, then they're a limited hangout. Focusing on crisis actors alone without noting the wider script and how it integrates into worldview, how fake news, simulated events becomes fake history. If they don't look at that, they are a limited hangout by definition. A limited hangout refers to big secrets that are going to leak. And in order to control it, they leak out some select part of it in order to figure out who's looking into it and to restrict the flow of information and to keep them focused on something irrelevant. There have been people I've been noting that I follow who've been looking at crisis actors for 10 years. They haven't figured out the entrainment between entertainment and fake news. They haven't figured out the meta script or predictive programming or how extensive and monolithic this thing is. They're myopically focused on bad crisis actors. And it's almost like the bad crisis actors are put out there to distract them from the bigger picture. All right, let's move on. It's been a few days, but, you know, technical things, no big deal. Gremlin-infected computers. A lot has happened. The NSA's secret sex chats. Intelligence officials maintain a chat room to discuss polyamory. Internal documents reveal. Okay, here's something. Roseanne talking about the wizards and warlocks who practice black magic under Satan and how they're being exposed right now. It seems like a lot of the QAnon stuff from 2015, 2016 is resurfacing. Same claims, same promises, same hopium, same addicts. A lot of those addicts are still at it today. But here she is claiming that any minute now, the black magic wizards and sorcerers are going to be exposed. Does she believe this? That would be my question. Plain Decoded asks, was auto hoaxer originally a pejorative? Because I unintentionally embraced it from IPS and somebody told me it's like identifying as a conspiracy theorist. Auto hoaxer was a pejorative used by conspiracy theorists, not the mainstream. It was used by conspiracy theorists to outgroup people calling stuff fake. When the Nice, Paris truck attack happened, I was in a chat room. It was Paul Joseph Watson from InfoWars. And he said, anybody calling it fake, get out. Auto hoaxers, get out. This was a real attack by Islamic terrorists. And I thought, wait, auto hoaxers? And auto hoaxers were people who were creating channels that were getting ahead of mainstream, because at the time, when there was a shooting, you would see it live streamed by CBS, NBC, and Fox and the other networks. And if you put up a video at the same time, a live stream, and you said, this event is a hoax, you could get a ton of traffic. We would get surges of traffic, and other channels that were competing for that traffic would be trying to get to be the first ones to call it fake. And so there was this race to call it fake because you were right most of the time, all of the time, and it gave you a competitive edge over those who were sorting through it. Oh, is it a false flag? Is it fake? InfoWars is a false flagger media company. They call everything a false flag. They never call anything fake. So they couldn't compete with that. And obviously, a lot of the people weren't doing their due diligence according to people who believe the mainstream news deserves this. But no, we've identified a methodology. We were correct. Presuming it to be fake until proven real actually makes sense. But, shortly after this, I think it was after Vegas, the news media said, we can't let other people report real time on tragedies. And they cut that off. So it was too competitive with mainstream. And that's why I continue to hang on to this word, because
New coffee shop sale from Greg.
I continue to use this term because it was a pejorative from within the gatekeeper community of Trutherville to prevent us from figuring it out. And by taking that term, we know that they're not going to use it because it exposes too much. They can take the term flat earth and put it in the mouth of every MMA fighter, various celebrities, and they can run with it, they can laugh at it, but they can't talk about this level of media skepticism. And the term auto hoaxer, by grasping that term, we kind of cornered it. So it's unco-optable. You can't water it down. And I guess one more point about it, we've refined it because we're not just calling everything fake because it's from the mainstream. The problem with this term fake is that many people in alt media call mainstream fake, but they don't call their own outlets fake. It doesn't mean anything when someone like Stu Peters calls the mainstream fake because they're within a subset of the mainstream box. But as a think tank, we have refined it. All right, let's see here. Thank you for that. Appreciate the support from Greg. Lickety Split says the goal is to raise the hell world up to this world versus raising this to heaven. So people need to think AI is real. It's foundational. Joined by Richard Jones says, is there still space on the raft? Yeah, the raft is scalable. It can be grown to any size. It's just a matter of, can you remain buoyant? Because if you're not adhering to the MSM plus subtractive approach, active media consumption versus passive, if you're not remaining objective, you will be submerged in the sea of irrelevance, and the raft is afloat. But you have to float on your own. There's not a physical raft. It's just a collection of us. Thank you, Diana Southard. We have 10 Blue Wrench members. And by the way, I have been uploading videos. I did a time lapse of a painting I did of burning rocks falling from the sky, sending stick figures running. Kind of abstract, surreal, non-Euclidean geometry. I did a time-lapse video of this painting I did yesterday, but I posted it for members. So Wes Skeptical, Conscious Reality, Scott Rankin, Nipotramus, Space Chimps, Cameron Kaplan, Chris Diamond, Chalkbody Outline, Travel C, and CJ have all been revealed. I mean, initiated. No, it is kind of funny if you have somebody who's lurking in the background, just maybe somebody who doesn't want to be noticed, and they're just hanging out. They might be kind of a lottery. They might be given a titanium blue wrench. Let's Go says the time lapse was dope. Awesome, glad you got to see it. And I have plans to do more. I was considering doing a live stream painting of Luigi, just because he has so many fans. I mean, the ethics of it obviously are kind of off. You know, should you paint the portrait of a murderer if it gets you a lot of money? And, you know, in the past, I would say that's kind of bad. You shouldn't glorify this stuff. But knowing it's fake, it doesn't make a difference to me. Ted Stryker says, how do lurkers make it in here without subscription and not having a wrench? I'm not sure how that works. I just know that if they're lurking, there's a chance they could be exposed. Okay, let's listen to Roseanne talking about the wizards and the warlocks. And I don't disagree.
Thing that we said in that prayer, it's happened. That we prayed that the secrets that these
New
people who
Kofi
have
shop
native
sale from
accuracy.
Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. God, she sounds unwell, in my opinion. She's talking about praying for some kind of revelation. This is where it's at. Says Tim, I need to catch up. Let's get you on some local access channels. Yeah, I'm totally for it. Is dressing like Luigi the new? That's actually not a bad idea. I was looking for a forest green hoodie. I settled for blue, but I was like, if I could find a forest green, I could probably, I don't know, tap into that. And I think the people who love Luigi are deplorable and psychotic. And it's a huge red flag. If you know somebody, or you're dating somebody, or you're one of your friends or family, if they say something positive about Luigi, just mark it down in your book. This person is a psycho. Like there is no other way to explain this. We're talking about, because they think it's real. And under the presumption that it's real, that this guy walked up to a CEO and murdered him, and their justification of it and their glorification of the shooter, that's actually technically antisocial personality psychopathy. It's pretty sick. And the fact that they're fawning over him, they've become fanatics. It's like there's a P.O. box where the fans of Luigi, can send their support. He's raised a ton of money. It's pretty sickening, but it's real. It's organic. It's like, it's so normalized. But anyway, it's a red flag. Okay, here we go. Roseanne, let's listen to her talking about something here.
All the way up to the highest authorities, that their evil deeds would be undone and seen by all of humanity, and that there's.
Okay, she sounds like she's crying. I don't want to catch COVID. She's sniffling a lot here and wiping her nose. And I don't dislike Roseanne. I like her. However, I wonder if she's not being taken advantage of. She's been put on this media junket for years by all these truthers. But very unhealthy environment to be in. Anyway, we were talking about Grok. It's a demon. And it turns out, I think there's something to it here. Grok was a demon lord. This is a game. Heroes of Might and Magic 4. Grok is a demon lord. Much more agile, animalistic, and brutal. He's the pathfinder of the demons. He's called the Sovereign's Gopher. Now that's interesting. A gopher. Because he kind of is a gopher. You tell Grok, do this for me. Grok used to be a lesser demon. He never considered himself smart enough to run. But now that the Empire has crumbled, he's on his own. That's the way he likes it. Okay, so that's a little ominous. Grok is a demon who ascends to power after the Empire falls. What's up, Jamarian May? Thanks for joining. NDB says, I've been here since last decade. Yeah, a lot of people joined us in 2020 with the empty hospitals, because that was one of the greatest examples of the media version of events not comporting with the real thing. The map, not the territory. These are not the same thing, but we're conditioned to think they are. No, gophers, not golfers. Gophers, like Satan's gopher. Go for this, go for that. So yeah, Grok, demon. Now, this is something that I think is actually more substantive. So this is a woman describing how Elon Musk is a brand.
New Kofi shop sale from Copacetic.
Thank you, Copacetic. Appreciate that. And by the way, one quick note here on South Pole. I'm selling tickets to the premieres, and I will make it available after a few days to members before it goes public. And we're doing it this way for a few reasons, and we know what we're doing. We had several successful seasons previously, and I think we know how to kind of snowball this thing, and it has a lot of room to grow. We had a false start last year, We came up with a really good skit with Ye working with the pillow guy, Mike Lindell, turning his pillows into Klan hoods with swastikas on them. And TikTok pulled it. It was kind of demoralizing. It's like, wait, we put all this work into something and they can just pull the plug on it before it rightfully goes viral. But this time we have a backup plan. But anyway, we're crowdfunding it, and it's going to be awesome, as the last one was. But this time we have a few more tools in our chest here. If you saw the video for Dawn of the New Day, One-Eyed Jack's new video, I did that largely with AI, and we're not just going to use generic AI effects, but we are going to use the effects. Like, for example, there's a scene, no spoilers, that does take place in Epstein's island. Can't get into detail here. It might have to do with the final experiment. But anyway, we have still shots of this Epstein temple. So you can take a still shot, you upload it into one of these various applications, and you tell it, can you animate this? Make the palm trees blow in the wind, etc. So we're going to be a few steps up from the chop or crop and drop style of animation, which I still like, and honestly, we're probably going to preserve crop and drop for the mouth movements. And if you know what that means, it's a specific style of animation, very rudimentary, but it's a style that we kind of refined. Yes, thank you, Jay Nelson. By the way, if you go to ips.monster, which is the main site, we have a P.O. box where you can send blue wrenches, you can send letters. If you want me to read something, if you want something for me to review, I'll pretty much, you can send me anything. Books, letters, wrenches, whatever it happens to be. But we have a P.O. box for that. And also, the IPS Insider, first issue sold out, second issue in production, and that's going to come out at the beginning of March. And I'll keep you appraised of that as well. Tim is a procrastination expert. No, really, I'm not. I don't procrastinate, but I think with anything, especially small business, it's always going to be uphill. It's always going to be like that, and you have to expect it. And for us, it's always been 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and it's been consistent, but we haven't really relented. Yeah, Witsit Vapes It will be on South Pole. Witsit Spits It, I think, is his new name. And if you don't know the story behind Witsit Spits It, it's pretty bad. But he wouldn't be the first neck-bearded, flat earth debater to have a history of domestic violence. Pretty bad stuff. Anyway, let's move on. So this is interesting. What this person is talking about is that Musk is a construct, like we often say. And she is talking about how the word Doge in Latin means leader, a historic title for the leader of Rome, Venice. Let me play this 30-second clip.
Elon Musk is a operation.
Yeah.
And somewhere there's a command center, and and you've got the group doing the social media, and you've got the group writing the speeches, and do you know what I mean? It's like a theater.
Definitely.
So you're in Europe, you know what Doge means.
Yeah, I heard that was kind of the head of what was it, the black nobility in Italy or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Venice, right?
Right.
Okay, interesting little tie in there. And I do believe she's right. She's accurate. Elon Musk is an operation. But she's wrong in saying, oh, it's this shadowy group over here that controls him. No, he's an operation just as much as David Hogg or Donald Trump or any of these world stage characters. He's just a puppet. These are highly sophisticated puppets. The world stage is a puppet show, if you haven't noticed. Braveheart 84 says Elyon means Most High God in Hebrew. Right. And the EL has a lot to do with it, like L. Ron Hubbard. It's part of this space religion and has to do with ascension and Saturn, Elohim, the whole concept of astrotheology. It's all tied in. And this concept of space, like space is fake, sure. What they present us in the movie on their their supposed trips to space, yes, it may be cartoonish, etc., but what's really there? I don't know. But the concept of space is a new iteration of heaven, of paradise. All the different religions have their versions of heaven and paradise, and this is the one that trumps all of them. The one world religion has a heaven that all the other religious types believe in, but also the atheists. And the atheists believe in space even harder than the other ones do. So they're the most devout members of the Church of MSM. Restless Bear says, no idea where the last 5 years of my life have gone. I think it's been quite an awakening. I mean, as far as like maybe I haven't moved, I've been maintaining the same routine, but mentally, I think I'm in a different space because I didn't know how fake things were, and it actually matters. And it's not that I was emotionally involved and triggered in things, but in terms of worldview, this has been a big paradigm shift. And we have been getting clarity. Our answers have been getting clearer. We have been finding what we have been seeking. And we're not wrong when we say that the only real conspiracy here is the purposeful and systemic entrainment of entertainment and news. In other words, all mainstream entertainment has been co-opted, but it's so subtle. You know, media is a subtle liar. It's not even a pathological liar. It's just a subtle sociopath. It is strategically lying to those who have fallen under its spell. It earns their trust, but it only lies when it has to. And its lies that get a pass drive all the other news narratives. So the non-liars get caught up in the lie. I call it the lie world order. Because it's not the new world order. There's nothing new about it. It's ancient. It's just getting a new paint job. Jamarian May says, it certainly appears there's waters above and waters below with dimensional layers in between. Right. Well, I think it's an open question. One of the most intriguing things I've come across recently, as far as like rabbit trails, I've been looking into John Dee because of his significance with regard to the British Empire. He coined that phrase, but also his relationship with Gerardus Mercator and their exchange about this supposed mountain at the North Pole, this magnetic mountain. They said 33 miles circumference. But what I find interesting about him is that obviously then, he would have been part of the Copernican revolution. But in his private writings, not cartography, not astrology, not his spycraft for the Queen, but in his work of what has been termed Enochian magic, meaning the system of magic intended to allow one to communicate with angels. He had a completely different worldview that had nothing to do with a spinning ball or solar systems, but it was about this plane of existence with layers he described as ethers. And in this concept, we are in some kind of, not his words, but we are in some kind of a cybernetic system, that the universe is like an extension of us. This whole hermetic thing, as above, so below, it really goes back, I think, to John Dee. But it kind of sounds like simulation in a way, but not in the literal sense, but more like we're just living on one layer, and we're a multi-layered being, and that this is the densest, but there are multiple layers to it, but that the world itself isn't really a shape, but it's an outward projection of all of its participants, and that's kind of his view. And again, I think that shape is uninteresting and irrelevant from our perspective. It doesn't even matter if you think about it. I mean, you can't see the curve unless you're a liar, unless you're a curvert, as we used to call them. And accepting the globe proposition only does one thing. And this is if you believe in outer space, the way they present it. It just gives you a finite ball with a expiration date. And it comports with the idea that we are a latecomer, an accident of nature, and that we're just apes with big egos trying to explain the meaninglessness of the universe. We're just coping with all this philosophizing. But I disagree with that. I'm not saying biocentric, but there is this, I think there's something to it. I think that we are the purpose of this place. And if I'm wrong, I'll find out when I'm dead. But if I operated on that premise, I probably wouldn't live life optimally. If I really believed that, if I was nihilistic, I probably wouldn't be thinking the way I do. Because I don't even think death is real in the sense that we're told. Yeah, I understand bodies die, etc., but I don't think our sentience necessarily is a byproduct of the body. That's kind of where I differentiate from mainstream science. I don't think it's an illusion. The soul is not an illusion. It's not a hoax. If anything, death as presented or as commonly understood is a hoax. What's up, Josh Lebsock? Thank you for arriving. I'm going to try to maintain like a 6:30 p.m. schedule. We got off topic here somehow. Where did we got into? Oh, okay. So Thel said, all your body snatch questions are answered in books like The Etheric Double, Secret Science at Work, and anything written by Max Freedom Long. Well, we've been talking about this idea of body snatching. In fact, I'm reading a book right now I picked up called Lightbreaker about this notion of non-corporeal or disembodied people, this person who is hijacking, like possession, the bodies of other people, and he's being pursued by this other party. And in the beginning of the book, he's just a spirit. He jumps into the body of a deer, and the animal body cannot contain the human soul, and it has some very terrible, gory side effects as it jumps in and out, and it just leaves these other vessels as like a trail of bodies, dead bodies. But anyway, it's an interesting theme, the idea of body snatching, and it kind of ties into what we were saying earlier about AI and what it means for sentience to inhabit dead matter, or perhaps displace the occupant within a living body. I mean, I might not be the same person I was 5 years ago. I might have been knocked off by some kind of Illuminati soul hijacker. Unmitigated Mind says the earth is a funnel cake wrapped around a lava cake. Flat Bob says, I believe animals have a conscience. You mean consciousness or sentience? Restless Bear says, I believe animals have souls. That's where it gets dicey for me, or insects. Well, it depends on how we define these things, because like animism, I think is one of the themes I keep coming across when I look into these magical philosophies, the idea that everything is technically sentient, but there's different orders of it. Dwayne Aubith says, I think even inanimate objects can have souls. Well, I have this book on the history of like runic runes and rune magic, etc. And it talks about this idea of holy sites and the architecture and stones, and how the exchange, some kind of energetic exchange between the perceivers, the people, and these locations and these ceremonies do have a way of imbuing these places with what you could call some kind of consciousness. I mean, it's intriguing. I mean, are these just archaic and perhaps primitive explanations for things that we didn't have explanations for pre-science? NDB says, only certain human beings have souls, everything else is NPC. Well, I was actually listening to a video on alchemy this morning, and it was describing the elements, fire, water, earth, air, and how these they say that we are not one, but we are actually comprised of 4 parts. And this would correspond to spirit, body, intellect, and emotions. And that I kind of think there's something to it. Like, I when you say people don't have souls, I would say that maybe some people aren't actively existing at that level. So in other words, we have a kind of, I think, a split. And I think that the consciousness that arises from the body is one level of existence, and then that part that acknowledges the non-corporeal, the intuition, the part that isn't merely a byproduct of the body, is not a separate entity. It's just a continuation of, but you may not have access to it. It's a matter of awareness, I think. And not everyone has it switched on. Have you seen the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds? It's about NPCs in this place called Free City. And as long as he obeys the program, like Truman in The Truman Show, he stays an NPC. But as soon as he starts making decisions for himself, little glitches in the system start happening, and he starts to attain the spark of higher consciousness. And it's actually triggered when he sees some woman that attracts him, and that spark, it causes him to sort of wake up a little bit. And the whole thing, though, is the idea of the NPC becoming sentient, and he has these futile attempts to try to get his friend to wake up. It's very much like They Live. It even has the glasses that cause one to see through the matrix. Verkjun says, the Hindus believe animals as small as a fly can reincarnate into higher life forms all the way up to humans. Humans have the ability to transcend their physical form and escape reincarnating. That idea is intrinsic to the I Am movement, Church Universal Triumphant. We've talked about this before. But they have this idea of ascended masters, which I think is part of the QAnon lore, how they obsess over dead celebrities and politicians like JFK and Michael Jackson. It's really weird and culty. But the belief is that there are some people who are able to ascend, but they decide to lurk behind to kind of do some work on behalf of the good people, the good guys, the white hats. All right, Copaesthetic has passed out 10 blue wrenches. Nicholas, Richard Jones, Jay Nelson, Oliver, Chris's wife, A Job 2677, My Third Eye, T Dog 135, Jungle Jim, Nicholas Pitts have all received the blue wrench. Thank you, Frank Murr. Appreciate that support. We have a lot going on here, but one thing we're not worried about now are gremlins. And it's all been because of the support of all of you that I was able to fix this and keep all of our projects going. And South Pole is going to be a staple. It's something we should have started a long time ago. We've tried, but the important thing is we haven't stopped. And the writing has continued, and we have quite a base of characters to draw from. Jamarin May says, those aren't real Ascended Masters. Oh, I went to one of these meetings. I used to really be into cults. I mean, I specifically investigated a lot of cults and tried to understand their worldviews. And I was trying to gain a broader understanding of what seemed to me to be interlocking cults that all converge at the top of the pyramid. And the I Am Temple do believe in channeling what they call Ascended Masters, the Archangel Michael. I went to one of their meetings, and I was shown these VHS tapes of Elizabeth Clare Prophet standing on this platform, channeling Michael, and all these people just listening like it was really the angel. And in one of their meetings, it was just chanting. I think they called it the Violet Fire. And they chant extremely fast. It's really hard to keep up with what they're saying. And they all do it. And supposedly, this opens up a conduit to channel higher powers, entities. And the whole idea is very dualistic. The idea that there's a spiritual battle between light and dark. And that the spiritual battle is only being waged by a certain percentage of the population who are even aware it's going on. And the rest of the people are just beat by it. But this whole thing is that in order to tip the scales in favor of light, those to be channeled. And I think it's kind of funny, though, how the QAnon movement has the Chans, where they communicate with Q. And everyone they're communicating to, Michael Jackson, JFK Jr., it's always done through like secret code, and it's just so culty. Leo Pirate says, reincarnation is a lie. In the day one dies, their thoughts perish. I disagree because, I mean, I could be wrong. I could be mistaken. But I do have a few instances where I'm certain I was in communication with a recently deceased. Not words in the usual sense, but And so it just suggestions to me that we don't just fall into a pit or float up on a beam of light, depending, but rather there's some kind of continuity. I don't know how long it lasts. And I don't think it's I don't think it's a coping mechanism. And I've talked to many people about this, and a lot of people who've noted these things have corroborated that, yeah, there's a similarity to how these things are experienced. Jay Nelson says, Andrew Fisher wrote an important book about ascended masters, Siren's Call of a Hungry Ghost. CJ says, do they sound like fast rappers, Tim? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Highly articulate, very, very fast, in concert. And I was checking it out because I was, again, exploring a lot of these different groups almost concurrently. The Violet Flame, that's the one. And I'm not against meditation. I was kind of interested in it for that reason as well. You know, this idea of these, they call them decrees, these chants, they call them decrees. NDB says, I've been given signs from a friend from the other side. You see, that's what I'm talking about. And I've had very specific things that are just like, it involves synchronicity in the way that it's experienced, but that it's undeniable. And, you know, you could say, oh, it was the devil tricking you, or it was a fallen angel. Like, I've heard people say things to try to say that it wasn't this person. And it's like, well, I would beg to differ. And that's why I don't even, I mean, I almost feel like I have a cheat code at life, because I don't really fear death, because I don't think that it is what we have been conditioned to believe. Like, fear of death is probably necessary, obviously, for a lot of reasons, but I don't think it's the end in that sense. But this idea of reincarnation intrigues me because I've noted a lot of cycles in my own life. And I was actually taught something. I was talking to well, I guess you'd call her a witch, where they had this thing. They were describing, you draw a cross and you put the years and the spiral. And you're just looking at every year and you're comparing, where are you? Are you in a cycle? Are you repeating the last year? Or have you moved forward? And you look for patterns. And if you conceive of time as a spiral, not a cycle, but you're always advancing or moving. But I had noticed that there would be certain times where it's like same situations, different people. I'm like, what's going on here? I'm having these repeated themes, and it makes me think about reincarnation, like this idea of cycles, and that you have to overcome certain obstacles or barriers or something. Like, there might be a point to it here, is what I'm saying. Like, you're eventually working your way out of a puzzle, a labyrinth. All right, let's see here. Restless Bear says, I've experienced things, I'm convinced. Right, well, I mean, I think these things are interesting. I really do. And I think it says something about the nature of this place. Like, it's not malevolent in that sense, if even in these really terrible situations, some kind of signal can be sent. Jamarian says, the notion of linear time is a deception. It's a habit. I think it's a habit. So, for example, I think that the past looks linear from our perspective, but that the future is anything but. And it all depends on the choices that we make, but that we tend to follow the next moment with what came before, a lot of preconceived notions, mostly a habit. But I think that the future is far more malleable than we would think. And I don't even think the universe exists until it's experienced, if that makes any sense. But that as far as the past, it's unchangeable. There's no Mandela effects. Objective reality is real. This place is real. I'm not a simulationist. However, I think we have to consider what it means if synchronicity and meaningful events are an intrinsic part of the human experience. Because these are not just instances of selectively noticing things because of a cognitive bias or self-fulfilling prophecy. We're talking about things that would seemingly involve extreme reordering of things and places for something to occur. I mean, synchronicities are unexplainable according to the dominant paradigm, and so therefore they are relegated to some kind of pathology. Oh, there's no meaning. That's just apophenia. But there's a point where intuition itself plays a role here. And I think I used to think that signs, for example, synchronicities, that these were indications of communications, perhaps from, quote, the universe or something vague like that. But the more I think about it, the more I look at it, the more it seems like, no, these are not coming from an external source, but rather it's that part of ourself that I referenced earlier, the aspect of our sentience that is not merely of the body and its perceptions, but the non-corporeal part. The higher self, you could say. And that this higher self doesn't exist in the time-space prison that we're in, but it exists in the future, where things are non-linear, where things are not set in stone, where it's still malleable to a large degree. There's this pretty interesting movie called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once that gets into this idea of the realm of possibilities and how unlikely possibilities, seemingly impossible, can be reached through unlikely combinations of decisions. Probability manipulation, but to a really advanced and targeted and highly specific degree, practically magic. And if you've seen the movie, the character is doing these really unusual things in order to effect these radical changes in the sequence of events. And if you replace her bizarre actions with magic and how it's been practiced throughout history, it makes a lot of sense. All right, let's see what else we have going on here. We were talking about body snatching, souls not housed by bodies, and how this relates to AI, and is Grok a demon? Elon Musk wants to pull the ISS down. We talked about this. Chris Matthews is still alive, and he's still as cantankerous as ever, and he urges another assassination attempt on Trump in an unhinged rant. So here's some stochastic terrorism from the left, which they're fine with. Critterfest Sanctuary says, my remote viewing is becoming scary. I can see books in a room, but every time I open one, the pages are blank. So remote viewing is one of these topics that I've come across that I think has a parallel in the New Age concept of astral traveling. I think they might be the same thing. Let me play this Chris Matthews for a second.
It's like Ukraine, like they don't matter. Europe, like it doesn't matter. He's the big boss at home and the big boss overseas, and nobody stands in his way. And I watch the Democrats and the media too. It's very hard to take on a firing squad. A lot of bullets coming your way, all aiming at you, and you've got to shoot back in all directions at the same time. This guy's taking down the Congress. He's taking down the rights of the American people. He's the big boss overseas and back here. The big boss. Listen to him. Do what he says. Nobody's saying that. Chris Murphy's trying. I keep waiting. Who's going to stand up?
He's making a lot of noise.
Who's going to take a shot back at this guy?
The hell was he saying?
Who's going to take a shot back at this guy? Yeah, again, I don't know. That's kind of vague. I wouldn't call that an assassination threat. But you notice that the InfoWars guys are going to say, oh, look, his rhetoric's getting heated, because they exist in the fictional universe where these assassination attempts are real. But you look at someone like Chris Matthews, and he probably thinks they are real. That's why I think these people are insane. I don't think he has the security clearance to know how much of this stuff is fake. That's what's nice about being an auto hoaxer, is you get a capstone of the pyramid level view of the world stage, and you didn't have to sign your name in blood to get here. You didn't have to take any blood oaths or sign off on some NDA. No security clearance is required. This is open source illumination. Lickety Split says, astral traveling reminds me of every college kid and high on psychedelics and academia. Well, I just recently watched this movie called Behind Her Eyes. And it's about these two individuals in rehab. And it's I don't want to give you any spoilers, but she teaches him astral traveling, and it involves body snatching and one person taking someone else's body. Very interesting story, but if you watch it and you listen to the methodology, it actually sounds like the writers of this show were pretty well versed in this idea of astral traveling, and the character uses it as a form of remote viewing, of being a psychic spy. But it's something that's easy to fake. There's a lot of charlatans. And when people make guesses, it's like prophecies. You have all these false prophets. Like this guy's like, oh, Trump's going to get shot at a stadium full of people. Every time he's at a stadium, it's full of people. That's not a prophecy. Truth of 21 says, people actually pay other people to help them astral travel. There's a sucker born every day. Jamarian says, walk-ins as they are called. Well, it's difficult to tell, and I don't take people at their word. I'm a complete skeptic. That's why I don't even assert. Like I say, in my opinion, life goes on after death. The universe doesn't exist until we experience it, and there's a correlation between intentionality and synchronicity. That there's a cybernetic link between your thoughts and effects. I say this stuff as opinions. I can't prove it to you with scientific rigor. And when somebody's making claims about traveling out of their body, it's like, well, what am I wearing? You can't let them guess. They have to be specific, because it's very easy to be lulled into something. And a lot of people just want to believe. And the desire to believe is a huge factor in why people believe a lot of BS. They just want it to be true. Truth Hurt says, psychic spies, didn't the government supposedly use them? Taking down my Occam's razor, it's more likely that this is just noise. That, if anything, the idea of psychic spies might even offer some cover for embedded agents. But I kind of find it all to be highly dubious, but I'm not totally closed to the idea. I was told about astral travel by members of a group, a cult, that believed that they were doing it. In fact, they even have hand signs that they teach their candidates. As in, when you get initiated into the cult of Thelema, they actually have certain hand signs and ways that you stand, gestures that they say to identify others on the astral plane. And so for years I thought, okay, this is interesting. Like, what are they saying? That they're out of their bodies and they're able to signal to others. Or maybe it's just metaphor. It's metaphor, possibly. Like, you could be in a crowded room, make a certain hand sign, and this would be a way to signal to other members of the cult that you're in the cult. Masons do this. Freemasons have a certain way they stand. And by standing in
Elon Musk is a operation.
Yeah.
And somewhere there's a command.
Sorry about that. This came up again. Again, if you missed it, this was someone saying that Elon Musk, her name is Catherine Austin Fitz. And she says that Elon Musk is a construct. Jimbo Kimbo says, Tim, have you read Carlos Castaneda? Not directly, but I've read a lot of David Icke's books, and his early books referenced Castaneda extensively. I think that's where he got his inspiration to go do ayahuasca and puke and talk to the universe and write another book, which happened to be a good book. Whether or not David Icke really took the ayahuasca, his book Tales from the Time Loop actually, I think, offers a pretty satisfactory explanation of the world. Jamarian says, ever thought about writing a book on your cult infiltrating experiences? It's a good idea, actually. You bring this up, kind of reminds me. I kind of got into it because I was really interested in the work of Adam Parfrey, who wrote like Apocalypse Culture. And he would go do firsthand investigations of various cults, and he would publicize them in his books. Not just cults, but fringy characters and stuff. And I liked that idea of reportage. I liked Hunter S. Thompson's gonzo journalism. Like, instead of talking about the Masonic Lodge like a church lady from the outside and you have no idea what's on the inside, why not go in? I think you should get involved. If you want to know a subject and speak about it authoritatively, you should go to the source. So I took that tactic when it comes to investigating these things, but it wasn't because I was trying to expose them, but because I was genuinely interested in what's behind it. Thank you, Ted Stryker. You brought 10 wrenches. There were no planes. Great username. And that's true. There were no planes. And there weren't any people on those planes. So you can subtract that from the body count and then work your way back from there. And some people will say, okay, well, nobody died on the planes, but there had to have been deaths in the buildings. Why? We'll take into account that there were dozens of drills going on that day. Was it Operation Tripod? They had like 1,200 mass casualty actors. It was a closed movie set. There were no planes. G33, Neat Chai Pops, Crack Neater 33, Mimsy Schwimsy, Romeo Fuzzy Feet, Barack Hailstein, K Swan, Tony Driscoll, Ski 1384 have all received the Blue Wrench Lodge membership. Mazel says I'm late. Well, you're not late, I'm early. But I'm working on getting here earlier and earlier. We have 154 people listening on video. Awakened Mind says ego is temporary. I agree with that. Because ego is really an aperture. Because we're not, our senses, that is. Our senses, our perceptions aren't reaching out and getting info and bringing it back, but it's filtering the tsunami of info we're getting every single second in all directions. And we have the semblance of order on the basis of what we ignore. We exclude far more than we consciously can perceive. We don't have the bandwidth to tap into all of it. Unless you're really high, I guess. But I think that the ego is there because it's necessary. We need to have some order in the chaos. But I think that from the perspective of the so-called higher self, the ego is seen as a necessary constraint in order to operate in this limited environment. But it's not the entire story of who you are. There's this concept of the soul I was looking at in this book I had that was dealing with like Egyptian mythology, and the idea was that you have this eternal, immortal self, and then you have your body and its sentience and its soul, which is developed during this lifetime. So it's like these twin souls, and it's kind of an interesting idea. There was this bas relief at the courthouse downtown with the dog-headed Anubis weighing a heart and a feather. And the idea is that if the heart outweighs the feather, that means if your body outweighed your soul, if you became more meat suit dominant, then having an awareness of your higher self, then that part is essentially swallowed by the alligator god and excreted into oblivion. But your soul, your higher self, continues on. P. Trippa, present and accounted for. What's new in chat here tonight? The new thing is new computer. Saving $150 to get a refurbished computer is very costly. I should have just waited and made it happen. But I did what I had to, and looking back, it was a mistake. Because I have a new computer here that was just a little more expensive than a refurbished, and it's 100%, 200% better. All right, let's continue. Lickety Split says the only thing real is Loosh. Well, okay, we should probably talk about Loosh. Like Loosh, Chi, Ki, Kia in Chaos Magic. I think it's called Ashe in Yoruban, what people think of as voodoo. All these various religious and magical traditions have an idea of some kind of life force that everything is, I guess, an expression of. And this life force emanates from you, you are radiating this with your sentience, your consciousness, and your focus. And intention, this is why I think intentionality has a great deal to do with what we call synchronicity. Because your intention is when you're focusing on the future. Your intent as in your directed will. Because you can't change the past. You can work in the present, but you're trying to create a certain future. You're trying to focus on, what happens next. And I think the focused laser-like intention creates some kind of information field, like a mass, an aggregate in the realm of possibility. And I think the stronger, the heavier that aggregate is, the more magnetic, the more it can draw itself into the next moment. And I think that our attention is the attention economy. I mean, think about that phrase. I think our attention is the real currency here. They don't want your money. They want your focused attention. They want your eyeballs on the screen. And I do think there is something to this notion of an energetic exchange. And I think this is why they have the Super Bowl and all these other major events that are essentially pagan ceremonies, because in some way you are giving something to them. The question is, what are they doing with it? One thing, you don't know. Like, so you're there, you're paying your money for your tickets, you're buying your popcorn, etc. But you don't know that they're actually reaching into not your wallet, but they're reaching into your soul, and they're pickpocketing at a much deeper level. Soul grabblers. So adrenochrome is probably real, but they don't take it out of babies with syringes and shoot it up or drink it. It's not a drug, a physical drug. Adrenochrome is likely just a metaphor for your soul energy and your sentience and your consciousness and what they're taking from you. But what's the point of it? This is why I brought up David Icke's book, Tales from the Time Loop. And the point of it in his description, and I tend to agree with this, is that if they can keep you focused at the meat suit level and keep you divorced from anything higher, to disabuse you of your intuition, to pathologize synchronicity, meaningful experiences that might suggest a deeper connection between the self and the universe, I think they might trap you here. Like, this might actually be a soul trap, and I'm not trying to be doomy. Like, maybe reincarnation is a penalty. Like, you did it wrong. Awakened Mind says, attention is indeed a commodity. Yeah, it's the main one. Absolutely. They want your soul. So anyway, we're talking about this because it's relevant. It's relevant to the topic of Grok, AI, and I don't know. I'm not here to mock. Progressive utopianism versus traditional worldviews that are, equally fallacious. Yeah, sure, we can mock this big paradigm, but there is something there behind everything. Estevan says, earthbound spirits are a huge issue with the problem of man. When one dies and is not connected to source, they remain earthbound and piggyback off the living people who share the same destructive interests, drinking, drugs, etc. Fascinating. I picked up this book once on necromancy. Well, I didn't pick it up. It's a strange story, but a friend of a friend, basically. My friend's girlfriend had this ex who was supposedly high on drugs and was a terrible person. She kicked him out. And we were told that he had some issues, but that he had set up some type of a place to live, like in this drainage tunnel. Go in the ditch, go down the tunnel a quarter mile. And she sent us there to get his stuff because he was in some kind of a facility. So we go down there, like half a mile underground, under the freeway, roaches everywhere, totally disgusting. And in the back, he did have this little loft set up, and he had a boombox and a bunch of books, big brass bell, a little Kim CD, I remember. But he had candles and all kinds of incense and stuff. And he had a book on necromancy. And it was one of these self-publications, like a typewriter. It had some rudimentary illustrations. But I read it. And I've seen it on Amazon. It's very expensive. and I don't know if I should. I'll find the name of it. I'll post it if anyone's interested in it. But the idea was that there are a lot of earthbound spirits that don't ascend, and that they are essentially dissipating over time, and they forget their names. And the concept here was that you could attract them with, and it was, the altar was like water, white candles, some pennies, a match, like all, and reading psalms, like biblical psalms. And that there was this invocation where you could summon to your altar all of the local, nameless, forgotten, wandering spirits. And that by giving them your attention and sustenance, they could essentially be made to do your bidding. According to this. But in order to practice this stuff, you were required to first bury a set of clothes, black clothes, in a cemetery for the space of 1 month. And then you exhume those, and then you can begin the process of communing with the dead. I'm not speaking from experience. I just read the book. But it's an interesting idea, though. The concept that the spirit sticks around. It doesn't just disappear. And that, moreover, there's enough of an awareness there. It's like a zombie army waiting to be commanded. Okay, let's continue. Dwayne Abith says, I'm a proselyte of the Church of the Subgenius. The Church of the Subgenius is a UFO cult. And they believe that Jehovah is a space alien and that he will be sending UFOs from planet X, the Xists, to wipe out mankind. And it's supposed to happen on July 5th, 1998. So Flat Bob says, I got to work tomorrow. Much love, chat. Well, I'm glad you could make it. I'm glad we started earlier. And this is going to be the routine. I'm trying to go on 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time daily. We're almost at 200 live. I knew if we had earlier hours, we would reach more listeners. Appreciate all you who are now proud carriers of the Blue Wrench. If you have a Blue Wrench, you can go ahead and watch member videos. And you'll get the second viewing of South Pole if you miss the premiere before it goes public. Awakened Mind says, I used to have a Ouija board decades ago. I knew somebody who used a pendulum. You know, like a little chain with a weight. This is another weird story because I didn't expect this. I was contacted by a pilot who was retired, actually, from Delta Airlines. And he wanted to talk to me about why he thought the Earth was flat. And he said, I can only tell you in person. I know it's a disruption. So he PayPal'd me money to buy a ticket and to get Uber so I could go to his place and I could hear him out. And he told me he offered this to Jeranism and a few others, and nobody took him up on it. And I thought, what's the harm? He's just some old retired pilot who wants to explain to me why he thinks the Earth is flat. And he was a subscriber, and it seemed like a genuinely nice guy. So I flew out to Florida at his expense, and I went to his place, and I listened to his entire story. And it got progressively stranger because he was smoking some chronic. And he wanted to tell me about how, he had been, retired for several years, and he was doing very well. And he wanted to invest into IPS, and he wanted to invest into exposing NASA. But he wanted to talk about it in person. And he wasn't fooling around on this point. He showed me his Bitcoin. This was in 2017. And it was a substantial amount of money. He had boxes of gold coins with buffaloes on them. And he gave me 2 of those for my trouble. So we're sitting there talking, and I'm listening to him, and he's describing how after he said the Earth was flat, his children had him committed. And they tried to disabuse him of his fortune, and he had a lot of money. His son took his car. And he had to fight his way out of a mental home, and he took it all back. And he was so mad, he said, I'm going to cut my children out of their inheritance, and I'm going to invest this into the IPS. And I heard all this, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this because I'm not going to get between a family situation like that. And if he's not in the right mind, he's in no position to be investing, even just to get back at his kids. It's just like, it was too messy. But I was listening to his story, and like, he's describing how he when he was younger, he had a magazine, he was a writer, he built a cabin. He had this really interesting life story. He was into publishing before he became a pilot. But at one point, I noticed there was a deck of tarot cards on this coffee table, like on the shelf beneath it. I didn't mention it. And at some point, he's getting really high, and he pulls out a pendulum, and he starts like spinning it, and he calls out the names of archangels like Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel. And he's asking questions of these angels about me and about what we're doing. You know, like I was saying, I just brought this up because someone was divinating in front of me, and I've never seen this stuff in person. I've read about it. And I'm not writing the person off as insane or crazy, but I'm saying I've never seen that. Although it would be somewhat crazy, even if you're not crazy, to do that in front of somebody who had never seen such a thing. So he was expecting me to stick around for a few days, and we went 6 hours nonstop listening to him talk, describing his situation, how he got away from the mental home, how his children were terrible. And at one point we took a break. We sat out on the balcony. It's overlooking this lake. And it was a nice place. I mean, really, he said, hey, there's a key right here. He said I could use the car. I mean, he was just trying to offer everything. He took me to this friend of his that owned a frame shop to introduce me as an artist. And I was just like, okay, this is getting really strange. So the next thing I did is the next morning, I left as he was out on a walk. I took an Uber and I disappeared as fast as I could. And I disappeared because I didn't want to be involved. Because he was obviously highly erratic and was just out of some kind of dramatic situation. And he was so mad about it that he called PayPal and he claimed fraud on the money he sent me for the ticket. So he sent me money for a plane ticket, money for Ubers and all this stuff. And then he retracted it. So the trip costed me a couple $1,000s. So I lost money on the trip. I made a little bit back with one of the Buffalo coins, but no, it was a huge waste of my time in a way. But he was anyway, yeah, surprised I made the trip. Yeah, I only went again because he sounded sincere. I don't know. I'm not going to do it again. Let me fly across the country to somebody I met over the internet because they want to spend $500,000 exposing NASA as a bunch of fraudsters. Like, it sounds like a great idea. But if somebody wants to invest a lot of money in exposing NASA as fraudsters, I'm not opposed to it. But, you know, I have certain, I don't know. I'm not going to take advantage. And who knows what would have happened? I can only imagine. Leo Pyre says, seriously, you're a real journalist at heart. No, I don't think he was like that, Diana. He had been married 5 times. I'm not divulging names or anything else, but that tells you something. One of the reasons I left. I'm not criticizing people who've been married multiple times, but 5 times, I don't know. Curterfest says, I had a raccoon whose eyes would light up when people see the video of it. They can't explain it. No lights in the background, no tricks. It's scary to see it. Your coin story is amazing. Yeah, raccoons are fake. Was he a Nigerian prince? No, he was a retired pilot. In fact, he wrote a letter. But anyway, when it comes to the flat earth, you know, I asked him, well, what makes you think it's flat? And he just said it looked flat. That he had never had any indication that it wasn't. Something else I should point out. He was huge MAGA. He had a red Trump wig and a suit, like a Trump suit. Like, this guy was so deep into MAGA. Like major, one of those, you know, flag waving, get on boats. And so I guess looking for a cult. Truth Hurt says, never come between greedy children and their money. Yeah, that's what I thought. I imagine, I don't remember the name of the car. It was some fancy, like, $200,000 black sports car. It's like, I can only imagine what would happen. I didn't want to get involved. Jamarian says, I need an Osmond book about these stories. Well, I have to wait till certain people are expired. I don't know. I wouldn't want to get sued. There are some people that we should talk about, honestly. In case something happens, we should get it out there. I'll answer any questions. You were lucky to go out unharmed. He didn't give off serial killer vibes, but there was something off. There was definitely something off. It almost felt like a setup in some way. But it was like kind of strange and unusual. This is why I kind of thought I had to leave, because he had boxes of gold just sitting around. And he said, I'd send this to you with you right now, but you can't take this to the airport. You know, they'll wonder what's with this. So I thought, what does he mean for me to do? Drive across the country with a box of gold? And then do what with it? I mean, I had some ideas. It did not cross my mind to take the money and disappear. I just thought, what practical use is there? And we do have some ideas, but one of the things I said at the time was, I'm not interested in big donors. We don't want one person with creative control or a heavy stake. I would rather have 1,000 people donating their lunch money to make a billboard than having 2 or 3 people, putting up their resources. We have to keep this think tank really, I think, about the think tank, about the open source. No monopolies here, no influencers. Okay, let's move on here. It's been great to catch up. I know it's been a few days, and I know we have not covered a lot of the recent news events. Steve Bannon did a Nazi salute, too little, too late, and he is so jealous of Elon Musk. He's always ripping on Musk as a toddler, his demeanor, etc. Steve Bannon's just mad because he gets fake swatted, nobody cares. He gets thrown in fake jail, nobody cares. He's one of the most, I think, insurrection-y of all the insurrectionists, and nobody cares. Like, who cares about Steve Bannon? Does anybody here? And I think that he's kind of flailing here, trying to remain relevant, and he thinks that throwing the Nazi salute's going to do it. Kind of like Ye. Ye couldn't get attention with his GIMP any longer. So now he throws away his whole X account with, pro-Nazi stuff. He got his Shopify shut down, selling Nazi shirts. And then he says that he was canceled. It's like, no, that's terms of service. If you're a billionaire in real life, it would be very easy to distribute a bunch of Nazi shirts. You wouldn't need to rely on a dropship company or something. Starboy says, would you ever go on Higher Side Chats? Yes. I want to send, is it Craig Carlson? Is that his name? Higher Side Chats. I want to send him a copy of Autohoaxology 101 and use that as a basis for a conversation. Conspiracy Alarmist says, it's normal in my world. Before Nipsey Fake died, all I listened to at work all day was YouTube tarot psychics. Well, I think there's something to tarot. And there's a few things to cards in general that are worth looking at here. If you go along with the concept of as above, so below, the idea of the macrocosm and the microcosm being inextricably intertwined, as in, like the tarot cards, for example, it represents as like the first 22 cards are separate, I should say, from the second half of the second section of the deck. So part of the deck we have it as our playing cards, the 4 suits, which are the 4 seasons, the 4 elements, and the playing cards derive from the occult tradition more than from where they created for games. So, they weren't really intended for that. But you have the 4 seasons, 52 cards, 52 weeks. It's all solar symbolism when it comes down to it. And it ties into the same story. And the first 22 cards, the Fool, Magician, Devil, Tower, all these cards, the Hanged Man, the ones that are more popular, these ones are sort of separate, but they've combined them. But the idea of divination has to do with like augury, about how You can discern the future through randomized phenomenon, whether it's dice, sticks, tarot cards, pendulum, the entrails of a bull. You ever look at a pile of spilled entrails to know what's going on next Thursday? Because that used to be a practice. Tea leaves. People read tea leaves. But how does this work? And the way it works is, and I don't think it has to do with the cards, the Ouija board, the tea leaves, the guts. What it has to do with is free association and intuition. And where does the intuition come from? My presupposition is that intuition is that part of ourself that isn't constrained to the here and now. It exists in the future. I mean, it's in the now, but it's also in the future. And as such, I think that the idea of divination, augury, of reading into the randomness is simply a way through the medium of synchronicity that the higher self can communicate to one. And it can happen through any means at all. In fact, a lot of people experience synchronicities through random things in their environment. You know, book titles, license plates, words spoken by people. And when you look at different divination systems, yeah, there's different, like the I Ching, for example. But what's the foundation? What's the fundamentals? The fundamentals is random events or phenomenon used for the free association and intuitive glimpses into potentialities, potential outcomes. Things that, and when I say the higher mind that is unbound by the ego would have access to all the information that we censor out by default. So if you have a bad feeling about somebody, it's likely because you perceived something that just was outside of your filter. But you still get that information. But how do you access it? That's the question. Well, you access it through spinning a pendulum when you're really high with a stranger in your house, like that pilot, or any means. I knew someone who would throw little bones, and had these ways. And I have a book on runes where there's different ways they do it. But one of them is they throw them, and the way they group says something about it. I mean, it's all really interesting how intricate these systems are. I think there's a system I've seen that involves like chopped up coconut shells that are flipped over. I mean, very much like the I Ching. Anyway, moving on. Leo Pirate says, in the book of Acts, they cast lots to select Matthias. We're the oddballs, not MAGA. Critter Fest Sanctuary says, what do you think about the Go Fast camera hitting the firmament, real or fake? Yeah, that should have been put down 5 years ago. The rockets that you buy, you can buy these at hobby shops. If you get one that goes that high, there's a certain point when it reaches the apex where it pops out the parachute. There's a mechanism where it pops out a parachute at a predetermined altitude. And so when you look at these videos where the rocket's going up really high and then suddenly it has a pop and then it falls, it's not hitting the dome. The parachute popping mechanism has deployed. And this has been misrepresented as a rocket hitting the dome by David Weiss from Deep Inside the Rabbit's Hole. And he maintains this one for some reason, and it's been debunked a million times. So there's no reason for people to say that rockets hit the dome. Look at this video on YouTube, it's proof of a dome. No, it's proof that you haven't investigated the real cause of it, because there are people out there who are spreading misinformation. Joe Saunter says, I saw the video of Anne Heche's death, and from the angle from the helicopters, you can see she gets up under the sheet before they put her in the ambulance. Yeah, that's a very ominous event. I mean, was that fake? Why was she getting up and thrashing? Ted Stryker says, whatever happened to the doc you participated in? Yeah, it's on a TV show. I think it's paywalled. I'll see if we can dig it up and put it onto the YouTube. Oh, somebody says chemtrail divination. Constant elevation. I'm surprised no one's reading vape or chemtrails to determine the future. That's pretty funny. Now, you can say that the persistent condensation trails are indicative of weather conditions that might be conducive to rain in the near future. Like, you can kind of predict the weather using condensation trails. Chemtrail believers will say that the trails are causing the weather, which is the faulty causality fallacy that they fall for every single time. Leo Pirate says there should be a chemtrail vape flavor. You know, if Richie from Boston promoted that, you know, he could retire. He wouldn't have to sell any more storable food items. If you don't know Richie from Boston, he used to drive around pointing out chemtrails. And I thought, this guy's the chemtrail guy, because he had this like vocal fry, which I thought was from seeing all the chemtrails and always breathing it in. And I thought, this guy's taking one for the team, going out there and warning us the sky's filled up with poisons to the detriment of his own health. But then there were other times I noted that he's vaping in his Jeep. And I asked myself, what's worse, vaping in a Jeep with the windows up, or whatever is in the sky 30,000 feet above your head? The first person that tried to pitch me on chemtrails was smoking a cigarette at the time. And I just thought to myself, I'm far more worried about what's in the cigarette than what may or may not be up there. Okay, move on. Look, I like Richie from Boston. I just don't know what he says anymore because everything he does is paywalled. Richie from Paywall. And I don't have a criticism against making money. I think that you should. I think it helps the channel. I think it's better for everybody if we're successful. But the business model of paywalling stuff and then getting clickbaity and crying wolf, yeah, I think a lot of people are tired of it. I'm more interested in just getting all the information out there because we are educating, not so much educating or indoctrinating or teaching, but we're aggregating those who've already figured out. We're gathering the deprogrammed. That's pretty much been our focus. Nick Fingar says, have you seen Industry Hoax Channel? Yeah, I like Industry Hoax. Still MSM Plus. I mean, there are people who can call out a psyop and recognize it and understand the utility of it, the psychology behind it, what they're trying to do to people with these particular psyops, but they still assume the base event is real. Like, oh, this rapper did die. Or if they acknowledge that this was faked, it's against the backdrop of the psyop entertainment complex's usual claims. So, like, we're still approaching World War III, AI, there's still adrenochrome drinking Democrats. But I research pretty much anyone. I'll listen to anyone's videos, even if they don't have the big picture, because most people don't. And there's a reason why. Because there's no platform for truth. There's no platform for an objective and skeptical criticism of MSM. There's not a platform for it. Alt media is alternative shadows on the wall. You're still a caveman if you're alt media. You're in Plato's cave. Lickety Split says, haven't heard that name for ages. Yeah, it's never been a thing for me. Look, I stopped taking him seriously on March 30th, 2020. The end of the month. He's like, get ready, because on April Fool's Day, they're going to shut off the internet. They're going to shut off the power, and a black car is going to come, take me out of my house. You'll never hear from me again. Internet's going down. Everything's shutting off. And after saying this, he's like, so act now and get 20% off on Richie from Boston storable food items. So you got like Richie from Boston products to buy before everything shuts down. And I'm like, how's Amazon going to get this to me? Is my mail going to work? Am I going to get my mail tomorrow? Like, how is it even going to get to me if everything's been shut down? So I think he oversold it. And I think at the time we kind of drew a line and we said, look, if you're a doom boofer, if you believe we're in the end times, we don't have common ground. Like, okay, so the idea of finite Earth, or presuming it to be finite, is premature. That's why I say infinite plane society. I'm not asserting it to be such, but I'm saying we don't have full coverage. We don't have all the information, so we shouldn't operate as though we do. And similarly, I don't think we should operate like time is finite, like it's about to run out. It's about to end. We're in the end times. That's another psyop. It's all about time and space control. The design authority, like in Megalopolis, these are like the strangers in Dark City. They control time and space. And they control time and space by artificially prescribing limits on both of these to keep you trapped in the here and now. Lickety Split says Israeli pagers did 9/11. Jet fuel does not melt steel beams, but chemtrail juice does. Like, I'm inclined to think that the chemtrail fuel, the stuff they put in the planes that they spray, everyone's like, what are they spraying? Yeah, it's chemtrail juice. Well, chemtrail juice burns so hot that it can take down towers. It could literally cause towers to melt and free fall into their own footprints in 7 seconds. Chemtrails brought down the Twin Towers. Joe Saunter says, if you got the food buckets in 2015, I'm almost positive they'd expire this year. I don't know. They have a 10-year life expectancy. Ted Striker says, what do we do with the bird flu and measles spreading? I'm disappointed that monkey pox didn't shut us down. Like, I was hoping that would be it. Like, I'm ready to sit down for a year and just watch Netflix and make cartoons like we did in 2020. I can use a lockdown. It's not going to affect me. I got a press pass. By the way, if you didn't know, press passes are back for sale. So go to the shop, ips.monster. Just scroll down. I'll put the link there. The IPS press pass makes you an essential member of society, like the media. You don't have to lock down. You're unlockdownable. It's a freedom pass. And what's the basis for it? Well, you're reporting. You're making observations, and you're calling Infinite Plane Society as a field correspondent. You have every right to be out there on the streets, whether it's nuclear fallout, monkeypox, zombie apocalypse, UFOs, drone wars, whatever they dream up. You don't have to stay home. Howdy, Clockwork 113. Thanks for joining. All right, moving on. For some reason, Nick Fuentes is still being talked about. Nick Fuentes talks about Steve Bannon throwing up the Roman salute. And he says, it's getting a little excessive even for me. So, Nick Fuentes is an interesting character, and I think I solved him. I think I figured him out. Like, I don't think we need any more psychoanalyzing of this character. And I'm not making fun. But he's a test tube baby without a father. And he's also of mixed ethnic origins. So the idea that he's a white supremacist follower of Hitler, a white supremacist follower of Trump, where does that come from? I think it makes sense that he is looking for this father figure, this Führer. And so I think his Trump worship, his love of dictatorship, his entire ideology, I think it's all just a coping mechanism. Maybe he has some sense of insecurity. I mean, okay, so he lives in his mom's basement. His mom watches his shows. They have a great relationship, like Norman Bates and his mother. I'm not saying it's unhealthy, but I'm saying it's kind of strange that he's the one who said, your body, my choice. That's this guy. He's the one who said it. He's been promoting sexism and sexist views and misogyny for years. And I'm like, everything he has, he owes to a strong woman. So anyway, we're done with him. Angle of Elevation says, what do you think of the recent plane crashes? DEI, firing tower people, planned failure. Yeah, okay, I'm glad you brought this up. Every plane crash or every plane malfunction since Leave the World Behind came out in 2023 has been blamed on DEI if you're on the right wing. If you're on the left wing, it's being blamed on the right wing and their deregulation, their cuts. So you notice this is a pattern. And the pattern is one side blames government, the other side blames capitalism. They're saying that Boeing is essentially a paragon of crony capitalism, of insiders who are using government positions to their advantage in the free market, putting profits over people. So those are two narratives. And if there's two competing narratives for something that's probably a psyop, then you can drop both of them. Any bifurcated psyop is just fake. It shouldn't be split like that. Like, well, how are you going to interpret this plane crash? Well, since I'm a liberal, that was caused by the capitalists, cutting corners for profits, for big bonuses. No, I'm a conservative. That was caused by DEI. This whole diversity thing is causing plane crashes. Thank goodness for Doge getting rid of DEI. And so both of these are wrong. So they're both wrong. But they set this up every time. And every single PSYOP has the same explanations, where the left is like, oh, the school shootings are caused by right-wing gun culture and the Second Amendment. And their obsession with property rights and defending their property. And then the right one will say, no, the shootings were caused by SSRIs. It's a mantra. Every alt-media right-wing conspiracy theorist from Alex Jones on down will say antidepressants cause school shooters. It's the dumbest thing. And even if many of them are on antidepressants, that's just one of many common denominators. It's the whole correlation is not the same thing as causation in every instance. So you can go ahead and forget about the DEI narrative. Why was Trump shot at? Oh, it was, if you're on the right wing, it was the deep state. It was Obama, because he's a threat to them. Or they'll even say they let it happen because it was DEI. They said it was the female DEI hires that allowed him to get shot because they weren't tall enough to block the bullets. What are they doing out of the kitchen? That's the kind of stuff that you were hearing from the people on the right. And when they're engaging in these culture war political footballs, they're missing the fact that it was fake. So they use these stories in order to get people distracted from the fakery of it. So the left wing is like, no, these plane crashes are because Trump and Musk fired all the air traffic control. So they give you alternative explanations to fight over. Estevan says crisis actors cause school shootings. Drills cause school shootings. You could make that argument. Every time there's a school shooting, there's always a drill that happened right before. So it's like, well, maybe this is some kind of explanation. Drills cause school shootings. You could make that case. Truth Hurt says, how much more can the weak masses' minds take? Good question. Because there is a deluge. I used to say they cram 48 hours of news into every 24-hour news cycle so you don't have time to parse it all. They ramped it up. Every day, you get 3 days worth of news. And if you believe it all, then you're like, okay, I'm submersed. Let me just follow this person, this pundit, and that blue check, and I'll know what's going on the best I can, and I'll assume everything else is real. That's what I call the sea of irrelevance. If you don't have a heuristic, if you don't have a methodology, if you're not an active critical thinker on the subject of media, you couldn't possibly parse through it all. But we have ways of categorically dismissing entire claims. You could say that MSM is a reality wood chipper, and it turns it all into mulch. And that's where the people are at. Leo Pirate says, have you ever read the Illuminatus trilogy? They talk about Operation Mindfuck. I actually have the second book in the trilogy here. I want to read the first one. I started to read them. I've read a lot of his nonfiction work. I'm a bigger fan of Robert Anton Wilson's philosophy and his nonfiction. And I think he figured out quite a lot, but not all of it. But he had a really strong concept with regard to reality tunnels. Robert Anton Wilson's kind of behind the scenes in the number 23, the Jim Carrey, where it's about a book focusing on the number 23 and synchronicities. And Robert Anton Wilson wrote a book, Cosmic Trigger, about the number 23, which he correlates to the dog star, Sirius. And he wrote the book about all these synchronicities he was having with the dog star and the number 23. But yeah, his writings, I'm familiar with the Illuminatus trilogy. I really wasn't able to get into his fiction, but I'll probably try it again. I really liked Coincidence. I liked Prometheus Rising. And Prometheus Rising is a good one as well, because it describes man as essentially at this point responsible for his own psychological and spiritual maturity, our own evolution. Like we've reached the spiritual singularity. Either we're going to be confined to the meat suits and our consciousness is going to be relegated to that because that's our worldview, or you're going to break that worldview and incorporate this higher aspect of our being, which he gets into in Prometheus Rising. He was a friend of Timothy Leary, and he had this model of the mind, which suggested, and it's probably oversimplistic, but it suggested that the left brain is all about terrestrial survival as a animal, in the jungle. How do you live? How do you survive? But that the right brain is for our future evolution, and that we exist primarily in a left brain linear prison, and that you break on through to the other side and you achieve a higher psychic wholeness, which he describes as alchemy, in a way, an alchemical transformation, but that he prescribed yoga, magic, and drugs as ways to access this higher self. He even kind of compared different drugs, or he and Timothy Leary associated different drugs to what he called the circuits in the left and right brain. And he said the right brain drugs would be marijuana, mushrooms, LSD, and I guess anything psychedelic. But the things that are geared towards left brain would be, alcohol, opioids, and cocaine, stimulants. Interesting book all around, Prometheus Rising. Leo says, I've been meaning to read it for research purposes. Yeah, I may have to reread it. The story of Prometheus is kind of interesting too. You have the idea of the elite or the god, and they have their fire, and then you have the masses in darkness below. And Prometheus brings the light down, starts civilization, and for that he gets punished. And I kind of think that's the lie world order's model, that humanity exists in a world of darkness, and the power elite are at the capstone level, and the light, the secret information, is kept out of our hands. And if you tell the truth, they do, in fact, in a way, they do kind of chain you to a rock and have a eagle eating your liver every day. And that's the censorship. That's the unacknowledged, marginalized thinkers who are essentially punished for shining a light on things that the main spotlight does not encompass. We have to remember that what we're fundamentally talking about here is a worldview monopoly. Every religion has a worldview monopoly. It aspires to that. So your holy book is the blueprint that everybody should live by to have the perfect life. And so is this guy's, and so is this guy's. So you have all these competing worldviews. If everybody followed this one, we would have global uniformity. And this competition has really defined religions. You have all these spin-offs. They're all trying to essentially claim to be the one. And I would, and I maintain here that this worldview monopoly as an agenda, as the real purpose to religion, which is about it's about control. The priesthood mediates the minds of the masses so they can be controlled by the power elite at the top. I think religions all serve government. But moreover, media is just the newest and most advanced iteration of religion. I think media is globally the state church. It's the world state church. And it supplies contemporary myths. It supplies God constructs. It has all of the aspects, all the components of the old worldview and paradigm, but updated with science fiction. So I think we've been given a science fiction religion for the masses. Now, I'm not saying I'm not anti-science, but there's a point where science becomes science fiction, And I think that when it comes to our cosmology, when it comes to a lot of the big questions about life, I think we've been given science fiction. And I think that it's a useful paradigm because it de-souls man. It turns us into these highly intelligent apes in a very predictable universe. And, we're given a version of events that I think makes us safe. I think we're domesticated in that sense. I think we are essentially conquered. What's the quote about conquerors write the history? Well, how do you think that's done? Through the media. The media is giving us our history every single day, and a certain percentage of it is fake every day. The stuff that's fake never gets corrected, and the fake stories are the big narrative drivers for everything else. The fake is the dominant story every time. So our history is totally bent, which means our collective worldview is built upon an edifice of lies. That's the real conspiracy. And we're unmasking it every day. We're describing how it works with predictability. Lean Dion says, Elon is more cringe than ever being in the spotlight so much. He needs to go back to SP. He's a walking meme. But Elon is an operation. His fans think that he's just some random guy who's going through these... it's interesting to watch, all these appearances, and he's going through these battles with the government and Doge, and he's on Trump's side, and someone blew up a Cybertruck in front of that tower, sending a signal to him. He's getting death threats. So you see, he's like this really engaged person on the world stage. He single-handedly has destroyed cyberspace. He's responsible for mind viruses causing violence. But he is an operation. There's not some individual here. If so, it'd be awesome. He's like the biggest troll of all time. Naming this entity Doge. But when it comes down to it, he's part of the PSYOP entertainment complex. And it's all a manufactured persona. Like the idea that he's autistic, that's manufactured to appeal to 4chan. The way he talks when he talks about simulation theory and AI, yeah, it's based on Nick Bostrom's speaking cadence. He's part Gene Wilder. He's part Tony Stark, Iron Man. There's some Jack Parsons in there, Werner von Braun, a heavy dose of Henry Ford. He's a composite character. And the cringe stuff, yeah, there is that. And that has an appeal to a large segment of the population. His dad is strange as well. His dad, who married, who was it? He was 72, and he married his daughter, who was 42 years younger than him. Ex-daughter? Stepdaughter? How does that work? I don't know the whole deal. Their family is really interesting or weird. I'm trying to be polite. But his father's description of Elon's upbringing is far different than Musk's own description. And his father also seems to I think he's immersed in a lot of conspiracy theories. He's brought up stuff about Michelle Obama, etc. So he's also in that sphere. I don't know why he's doing it unless he just loves the attention. Leo Pirate says our planets are named after Roman gods. Yep, exactly. Our heaven and the entire space program is an example of religious syncretism. And it's done with science fiction. Science fiction has become the basis for our modern paradigm, and it's provided its mythos, its mythology, the idea of cosmism, of man's future as being multiplanetary. It's all based on heaven and paradise, but it's of course science fictionized. But yeah, it's definitely the abode of the gods. The thing that really clued me into this was when I started looking closely at the space program and their iconography. And I'm like, how is this any different than Mystery Babylon? And then it all made sense. Nasatology is how I describe it. The main religion of the world is Nasatology. It's like Scientology, but they have better special effects, worse actors. Scientology has better actors associated with it. But they're both space religions. And they're both predicated on the idea that in order for us to go to space, we have to have unity. And that is the story. The reason for climate change, climate eschatology, the wrath of Gaia is for unity. We got to stop the sinners, the wickedness, the polluters, the capitalists. And if we don't, we're not going to make it to heaven, to space, to our future as a multiplanetary species. All right, moving on. Oh, yeah, we mentions Iron Man. Yeah, Tony Stark, Iron Man. And these are associations that are intentionally built into him. Leo Power says, similar to how you study cults, I've been interested in fake perceptions of Christians. Why are they wrong? What's the motivation for the error? The real fascinating story. Yes. Yeah, this worldview warfare is a good way of looking at all of this. And it's very evident with left and right, where it's all about interpretation and where you're coming from. But the worldview monopoly today, the dominant one, isn't coming from a holy book. It's not any of the religions, but it's the MSM. So the MSM box is the box that we all live in, including the religious types and all the different denominations. And the MSM box is the one that says that we all live on a planet this size, this is its location, this is how old it is, and these are the weapons of mass destruction that we have to organize against. This is what's going to happen if you don't recycle. And this is the ideal way to live, and this is how much money to pay your government. Like, we all have our differences, and there's so many competing worldviews and belief systems, but there's the overarching system that we're all in. And that system is closed. It's a closed system. It looks open, but it's not. So the question of shape of the world is secondary to, are we an open or closed system? And it's a closed system of ideas. It's limited by the worldview monopolists, who not only inject lies and hyperstitions into our worldview, but they also eliminate by ignoring. It's their selectivity that we share. Immortal L says, they create the same sense of urgency that if we don't leave the planet, the race will go extinct. Yes. See, it's a religious thing. So NASA is a religion. Your high priests go really high. They go higher than all the earthly priests. They show them levitating in the ISS. Early Christians were said to levitate. I would say that is a modern contemporary miracle. I'd say walking on the moon, man walking on the moon was equivalent to Christ walking on water. These are miracles, not scientific achievements. And these miracles are meant to reinforce the authority of the priesthood. Michelle K says, do you worry about getting on their radar? Have you had any experiences where you felt watched? Yeah, I do have a White House connected stalker, somebody who was in Trump's orbit. I don't know if he is now, but he is in the White House press corps. There was somebody who was hired to shut us down. And if you weren't a follower of the IPS from 2017 to 2022, our channel was pulled on YouTube more than 150 times. And we just dealt with it. We just got used to it. And we reorganized repeatedly, but it was definitely a deliberate effort by somebody that we unmasked. And we figured out who he was, and he backed off. And I always counter stalk. I want to know who's looking into me. And it got kind of quiet. I'm like, where's this person who was constantly shutting us down? Well, then we find that he started working for the White House press corps under the name George News, and he's friends with Garrett Ziegler, who's being sued by Hunter Biden right now. In fact, their joint company is being sued. But no, we have been watched and stalked, and they've played dirty against us. So that's not a question. We says, so Tim, are you going to make the trash go away guy now? Oh, I have a junk hauling business. And I'm selling a bunch of art. Yeah, if you need some junk moved, and look, I used to move dead bodies. I was a decedent transporter for the Office of the Medical Investigator and for various companies. So like going to places and moving stuff, it's just simple work for me. But I started a junk hauling business because I have a truck. I'm getting it registered so I can get onto Google. I have to have a sign on my truck, but Google will list me on Google businesses, and then I can start getting ratings. So I have a side gig. I live really close to an indoor landfill. And if you, I could give the name of my business. Actually, it was, I went to ChatGPT and I was just looking for ideas. I went to Discord. I think it was Armin Ree came up with this. He was like, because I was like, I want to call it something connected to space junk. So I want the marketing angle to be, do you need to clear up some space from junk? You know, like space junk removal is like the artistic theme. On my business card, I have an astronaut on the moon in a dump truck. But the name of the company is Hall 9000. So if you want to make an appointment or see all the different payment options, if you need some trash removed, and I'm trying to expand from just taking out yard trash to maybe even cleaning out storage units. I have a lot of ideas on how to expand this. I used to do crime scene cleanup. When I was a decedent transporter, I would go to a house or scene where something terrible had happened, and we would leave with the bodies, but there's still blood on the floor. There's blood on the walls, depending on the scenes, and they just let people go back in. The families had to clean it. So I started a business where I would follow up behind these scenes, and I would contact the homeowner's insurance, and I would just clean it up that day, that night, and then I would send a bill. So the families, I would say, hey, just come back in a couple hours. And I could make a decent amount of money. I mean, in one day, I remember there was an overdose and, just some, it wasn't even much on the floor. It's just, I don't want to get into details, but I just rolled up the carpet, had it taken to the facility, and I had enough money from the insurance to pay for someone to repaint the place. But I was doing, one of them was particularly difficult. It was a very, very large person in a trailer in the middle of the summer. And, and these, you open the door to a place like this, and there's so many flies. Like you can hear the buzzing from across the street. And anyway, it was a follow-up job to the body transporting. I stopped because the company that was hired to transport the bodies, they had the contract. It was an ambulance company, and I had a van that I used their van, and so they had an ambulance department and they had the body moving department. They lost their contract, so I no longer had access to information about recent murders and homicides to clean it up. But anyway, I had done that for some time, so hauling junk is nothing compared to that, and I might get back into that because it's not required. And it should be required. Bloodborne pathogens. It should be required. I tried, actually. I tried to standardize it. I gave my business card to all the field investigators. Like, hey, if there's a mess here, just leave my card. I remember going back into the morgue and, I make a drop off, and then I'd go through the sheets and I'd see, and I'd call my friend I hired to work with me. I'm like, hey, go knock on this door. And there was competition. I went to this trailer I mentioned where it was full of flies, and there were like half a dozen of us, all these cars gathered around, and a couple trucks, trying to get the gig to clean up where we had a decomposed. And I was the one who removed the body. That's how I knew about it. I had been there in the morning, and this guy was large, and he was face down, and the fire department was there, and they sent 2 firemen in to help me move the guy. And I remember they were wearing their full gear and masks on, and I just went in my polo shirt and my gloves. I didn't even wear a mask. What can you do? Just breathe slow, or try not to breathe, because you can actually smell it in your breath when you get home at night. My girlfriend at the time said she could smell the morgue in my breath, and it's gross. But you're inhaling and stuff. Yeah, it does pay well. The crime scene claims paid well. I'm telling you, I made $1,200 an hour sometimes. Now, the gigs would be intermittent, and I considered moving to a bigger city but there'd be more competition. Anyway, I remember moving this one over, and I'm sorry to be grotesque, but we're talking about somebody who's face planted on the ground. You know, everything settles down. You know, anti-vaxxers are like, oh, the bodies were clotted. Yeah, they're all clotted. The blood congeals. But I'm like, you know, so I'm here with these fire department individuals helping me roll the person over onto the backboard, and we roll them over. And again, I apologize. I mean, trigger warning. When I roll them over, the face was stuck on the carpet. Like, I mean, it's just some of the stuff you just don't expect, you know. I'm like, that's bad. But anyway, you know, you bag it up, take it to the morgue, come back later, do the cleaning. So I go back, and I do get the cleaning gig. And I had a friend help me, and basically we were tearing out carpet, rolling it up, putting it in the red bags, and taking it outside. And I remember at one point, the look on his face, because he's like, you know, he's looking at this piece of carpet, and it's grotesque. Because, yeah, it's like, yeah, this guy's, like, pretty much his face is, like, embedded in the rug. Yeah, Hall 9000. That's the name of my cleaning company. And I might get into other stuff. Ted Stryker says, wow, Tim, love, hate the details. Right. Right. Well, look, I'm very stoic. In fact, I was known for always being on time. I never had any issues. We had a problem with people who would get hired and then they would quit. And you can imagine why. And I was the guy that when they had a new person in, they said, hey, this person wants to work for us. Can you take them on a run with you to see if they can do it? And most of the time people would decide, okay, this is not for me. I had a friend who wanted a gig, and he was a rapper. He was into that horrorcore rap where they're always rapping about killing people and violence and death, and he couldn't do it. You know, he couldn't handle the scent. He didn't want to be around it. Didn't want to touch dead bodies. And I'm like, you rap about this stuff all day. I take him into the morgue, and there happened to be a John Doe that was found. I think it was found in Elephant Butte, some lake, some man-made lake. And it was like literally like a skull and crossbones. Like everything this guy was about that he had tattooed on himself. It's like, look, there's some John Does over here. And no, he couldn't. But I was 92 Mike. So in the military, I was NBC, which is nuclear, biological, chemical, which is funny because I don't believe in this stuff anymore. And I was brainwashed to believe in this stuff. I watched all the videos of nukes and learned all about fallout and EMP. But after that, I reclassed into 92 Mike, which is mortuary affairs. And when I left that, I got the job at the state morgue. And I said, well, I was pretty much trained for this. And so then I got into the field. And then I got into the cleanup aspect of it. We kind of got into this topic because I'm talking about cleaning up junk. Not going to offer body disposal. Art of Thinking Out Loud Live Common Sense Analytics says you should do a few podcast episodes about your real life occurrences. That's a good idea. If people want to know about it, I mean, I think it is interesting. We've been talking about this stuff for some time anyway. You know, death, what happens next.
Thank you for feeding the Kraken thirst. The IPS thanks you for your support and participation.
Thank you very much for that. Thirst for Truth. Appreciate that. Ted Stryker says, like with cleaning abandoned houses. Oh, yes. Another thing I'd like to get into is like hoarders. Because I picked up a couple of people who were hoarders. Like one individual was like in a studio apartment, was like a hotel converted into an apartment. And so he's dead and nobody knows him. You know, he's been forgotten about or something. So nobody comes checking for a few days until somebody, you know, smells they catch the scent. And it's like 6 feet of old magazines, just piled magazines. Like, of all the things to hoard. Leo Pirate says, I think how sheltered people are to real death is why most are blind to world stage deaths. Well, you know, that's one of the things that got me is I went from working in that profession to suddenly I'm doing eBay full time. And then I come across videos because I'm like, I remember how I came across this stuff. I was making these notebooks. So I bought a bunch of composition notebooks. You know, when school season starting, you get them for like a quarter. And I was painting like zombie themed artwork on these things, and I was selling them on eBay with like a pretty good markup. I called them decomposition notebooks. And I was making the $10 sales for each one of these things. That costed me a quarter. And while I was painting and working and selling, I was listening to videos on YouTube. And I went from entrepreneur videos to, you know, how to make sales videos, getting rich online, etc., to now I'm listening to Alex Jones. And then I start finding more conspiracy content. That's kind of how I veered into this stuff. And then I come across something about Sandy Hook. And I'm listening to this stuff and I'm looking at the videos, and I looked at these people responding to the events. And having just spent years, and in fact, one of the reasons why I got out of the funeral business is I got tired of being around the bereaved. I got kind of sick of it. One of the last things I did was I was assistant funeral director. So, you know, I did this for a time at a place in Ventura where I would drive the limo, drop off flowers, that kind of thing. And I got sick of being around the bereaved. So that when I see people on TV pretending to be bereaved, it's pretty obvious to me. I'm like, these people do not look like any of the shattered people that I've seen. So, and the lack of tears, their demeanor. So most communication, I think you could say 90% of the communication is nonverbal. You've got the words, but then you got your tone, you got your cadence, you got your body language, facial expressions. And all these things communicate more in total than just the words. So someone's like, boo-hoo, all my loved ones are dead. But their body language says, I'm getting paid. I work for the PSYOP entertainment complex. I'm an insider. I'm fooling all these dupes and I'm getting paid. Yeah, that's what I'm getting. That's my take. Art of Thinking Out Loud says, I used to clean up apartments and storage units years ago, found a lot of rare books and photos I still have. Yeah, I'm looking into that because, you know, if I'm going to be transporting and hauling junk, I'm interested in some of these. I've watched some of the TV shows about it. I watched this YouTube video today where this guy goes into thrift stores and Goodwills and he looks for designer clothes. And he turns a trip to the Goodwill into thousands of dollars in profit. We're not talking small items. Like he has a system. It's just amazing how much wealth, how much value people throw away without realizing it. Jennifer Reeve says, same here. I watched live as the Station nightclub burned down and saw some very real upset people. There's just a qualitative difference between somebody who's faking an emotion and someone who's having it for real. And it's safe to say that the media is an emotional manipulator. And a big part of marketing is emotional manipulation. And I think it's useful to study interpersonal manipulation, psychological abuse, psychological manipulation, because these tactics are all deployed by the MSM. If you look at the way that control freaks behave, if you look at the way that highly narcissistic people behave, you can understand how Big Brother could be described as a narcissistic control freak and a gaslighting abuser, a gaslighting, manipulative, psychological abuser. Art of Thinking Out Loud says, great actors address and study how the body and face responds to sadness and emotional trauma. Right, well, there have been many studies on this, and yeah, it is true. Like, your words can be canceled out by your body language. And a lot of the times when you think somebody's lying, maybe the words don't give away the lie, but it's given away in other ways. The issue today, the big issue, is that visual lies get a pass. It's easy to call BS when you hear it, but when it's on the screen and it looks perfectly real, you don't have any defense mechanism. unless you're a critical thinker and you know media is a liar. But most people are just falling prey to media fakery. I mean, I fell for it on a TikTok. I believe in whale-sized clownfish. I know they don't exist, but I believe in them because I saw one on TikTok and it was so convincing I couldn't debunk it. So if your standard of evidence is, I saw it on the screen so it's real, then your world is going to be enhanced, augmented by things that don't exist, like giant clownfish. All right, let's continue here. Leo Pirate says, affect is much more difficult to interpret in partial internet interactions. The younger generations will be completely disarmed for emotional, manipulation-based fictional news. You know, I'm glad we brought this up. I was just looking at a video on creating AI influencers. So there are people who are using the software where you put a face that you make. So you create a person that doesn't exist, and you put this face on a model, dancing around in the bikini, lounging by the fireplace. They have all these different scenes, and they use these to build up a following. And then you're going to their member site, and then they advertise stuff. So in other words, there are people who are pimping AI bots, and the consumers don't know. I mean, that's a whole other field that's developing where, yeah, people are literally falling for and maybe even falling in love with people that don't exist. It's like that movie with Al Pacino, Sim 1, about the pop star that didn't really exist. Well, there are all kinds of OnlyFans types, webcam models who may not exist. Like, how do you know? And it's only going to get better. And there's going to be a point where maybe people in the future are going to say, what difference does it make, real or fake? Sounds like that movie. What is it? THX1138, George Lucas's first film. I think it was released on a 311. We were talking about this one. It's this dystopian future where people pray to it's like a digital kiosk Jesus. Everyone looks the same, head shaved, mind controlled. And the way that they interact, there's no physical intimacy anymore. It's all holograms, and it's a completely sanitary version of the future. But I think that's where we're going. Because they have to condition people to find these types of scenarios to be acceptable. Like, consider this. I think the space program is a great achievement because ultimately, what is the space program? Beyond a replacement for heaven and a justification for believing the priests of nasatology and giving, science the final stamp as far as it is the arbiter of what's real and fake. There is another aspect to the whole space thing. And I think it has to do with, well, first of all, I say space is a metaphor for what's between your ears. It's about controlling your mind space. Then you have the idea of heaven. But then the other aspect of it, and I think this is far more sinister, is that it's presenting an ideal, an idealism. It's like this utopian ideal. So in other words, to live on Mars, that's now perceived to be the ideal. But what is Mars? It's a gulag. It's space communism, always has been. When you go to Mars, if you believe this is real and you're on your Mars base, you don't have your wardrobe, your car, you don't have your property. You're just a uniform. You're not going to have anything that defines your life here on Earth. When you're living on Mars, it's going to be a sustainable environment. You're going to recycle everything. They even have something called astrocrete, where they're going to recycle your blood and your urine and your sweat. And they're going to mix it with the Martian regolith and turn it into Mars bricks. They're probably going to recycle the dead in the same way. But this ideal is essentially a prison. You go into a gulag in Siberia, just calling it Mars. How is that progress? However, this has been sold to free people as the ideal. So how do you, this is what I think is interesting. It's like been a revolution against freedom itself, where the idea of freedom means government can't tell me to buckle up. They can't tell me to stay home or wear a mask. Freedom means no external constraints or controls. You can make money. They're not going to tax it all away from you. But no, we've been taught that the ideal is a propertyless commune in this distant outpost, and it's carbon neutral. What's up, Garrett Summer says Fahrenheit 451. What do you think, Tim? Burning books versus Brave New World flooding the information. These days, you can publish anything. You can tell the truth. I'm telling the truth right now. Nobody died on 9/11. School shootings are all fake. Mind war terror attacks against the populations. Trump wasn't really shot at. These are all true. Doesn't matter. I could publish it in a book. They're not going to burn it because nobody will believe it if they're within the closed system. So if you're in the closed system, if you're on the world stage, the truth is just going to bounce off your head. It's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't matter. Like I see these screeching libs on X saying Trump faked a head wound in order to win votes. But they also think the fireman died. And they also believe in all the other drama. You have to, if you're not off world stage, then none of the truth, none of the facts that we're pointing out are going to make any sense. Your frame of reference matters. Your presuppositions matter. And to me, this is about a reset. So one way to look at it is the masses have their nose against the screen, and the screen encompasses their entire field of view. So now their entire experience is framed by what comes from that screen. If it's outside the screen, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's no different than having your face buried in a holy book or in some ideology, and that's your filter, that's your lens. The conspiracy theorists and the woke recognize that the screen isn't telling the full story. So instead of saying the screen's a liar and rejecting it, they go deeper. They go into it. Now they're in a subset of the mainstream. So the MSM closed system contains Trutherville and Woketown for the people who can't just stay asleep. So now they're woke, and now they're red-pilled awake, but they're still caught up in the dream world. They're just having a more nightmarish experience. So a nightmare and a dream, yeah, they're both fake. The truth is arrived by stepping away from the screen, social distancing, getting away from it, and recognizing that this is merely a filter. And it occults a lot of what's really happening outside of its frame of reference, and it's not inclusive of all the information you would need to really have an objective grasp on reality. Objectivity is pretty much unattainable. Leo Pirate says, we are in need of a great debate about the future. Megalopolis, that scene had Adam Driver screaming it from a cloud, the internet. Yes, Adam Driver plays Caesar, who represents Trump in Megalopolis, which is Mogalopolis. It's about Megalon. Make Rome great again. It's obviously Trump. His antagonist is the mayor, who orchestrates an assassination attempt, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who's also the antagonist to the president in Civil War. Captain America, Brave New World. This is a dynamic that we've seen consistently. But if you haven't seen Megalopolis, it is about the future. In fact, Francis Ford Coppola said it is about what's about to happen. And he would know. The movie contains footage recorded on September the 11th, 2001. He paused the movie because the movie contains a 9/11-like scenario. It would have been redundant to have released it in a post-9/11 New York. So he waited 20 years. But if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. Adam Driver's interesting in the role of Trump, Caesar, because he's also the face of White Noise, which is about the nuke in Palestine, 42 miles from Butler. But he's another character. Also, I think it was interesting is, when I was watching this movie, the first thing I noted is, how come the main character looks like Neo from The Matrix? And then my next question was, my question was answered in the next scene, because his driver is played by Lawrence Fishburne, Morpheus. And in The Matrix, Morpheus is always there guiding Neo, describing how the Matrix works, how this space works. In Megalopolis, it's the same dynamic, but it's Morpheus describing to Neo, or Lawrence Fishburne's character, the driver, describing to Caesar how time works. So one has to deal with space, the other time and time control. In addition to having the Matrix reference through these two characters, their interactions driving around in the car with green lighting and rain, just like the Matrix, you have allusions to Dark City, which came out around the same time as the Matrix, and they're always kind of considered as part of the same group. It's kind of a genre. Dark City is about a world that is controlled by these individuals called the Strangers, who control time itself, and the images of the clock, Chronos, Saturn. Interestingly, in Megalopolis, Adam Driver Caesar goes to the top of his tower and he stands on the face of this clock. It's all about time control. But the Strangers in Dark City have these black rimmed hats, and they control time. They rearrange things when we're sleeping. In Megalopolis, time is frozen by the design authority, and they're the ones who are rigging everything. They control time. And they're wearing black suits and black rimmed hats. So the Strangers, the design authority, they represent Saturn. They represent time-space control. And I'm saying through NASA, through worldview warfare, and through the media, time and space for us is controlled. Our worldview, the world stage we exist upon, is their version of events, and they control it. They control its geography. They control its chronology. Neo's passport expired 9/11, says Anime Gematria, and his birthday was 3/11. So I look at that as something significant here, 9/11, 3/11. And the fact that Neo has the passport, and passport was a major prop in 9/11, ties into this as well. But I look at it as maybe the expiration of the old era, the old age, 9/11, and the Great Reset, the new age being born with 3/11. So Neo means new. So again, death of the old, birth of the new, the Neo age, 3/11, his birth date. And then, of course, 3/11 was the pandemic date, the Great Reset. The civilizational reset started in Seattle. Art of Thinking Out Loud says, has anybody watched Paradise on Hulu? There's an Elon-like character named Sinatra who's a woman. 25K chosen people living underground after the surface is flooded. I like that. That is interesting for a lot of reasons. The Ark story. So you have various versions of the Ark story. There's going to be a flood, the chosen get in the Ark. You have space arcs, like in Wall-E, which has all kinds of 311, 113 stuff. Even in the name Wall-E, you have the 113 code. The 113 code, Directive 113, abandoned ship, the Earth's uninhabitable, go to space, get in the space arcs. The underground stuff is also intriguing. You know, Elon Musk's, one of his wives, Justine Musk, wrote a series of books. I used to be an Amazon bookseller, and I would just read a bunch. And one of these books was called, I think it's called Lord of Bones. And it's interesting because this woman was married to Musk. And it's about underground bases with cloned bodies that are being infused with the souls of fallen angels through these satanic rituals. So underground bases, cloning, fallen angels, and possession. It's like, that's kind of interesting. Like, what are they really about? You think about the Babylon working, the origins of NASA, the concepts behind sex magic. What's really going on here? And if you don't know what that means, there's this concept in the occult which they call the magical child. And this is also what the Babylon working was about, where Jack Parsons, movie star Marjorie Cameron, and L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology were attempting to incarnate a certain entity into a woman. Like, in other words, instead of a human soul, something else. And there is a practice, they call it occult eugenics, and there is a practice in these circles where they do believe that the gestating baby can be augmented by summoned beings. And they said this would cause your child to be born gifted, psychic abilities, etc. And they call these the moon child. Some believe that Trump is the moon child. So the effect of that ritual with these three characters was meant to bring something into the world. And during that time, yeah, Trump was in fact getting ready to be born. He was born on a blood moon. Some say that there's a direct correlation, that Trump was the Antichrist they summoned. Piano says 9/11, 3/11, 6/11, 3/6. Yeah, there's something with these numbers, and a lot of it's obviously astrotheological. And this stuff is a part of our collective culture. What do we do on New Year's Eve? New Year's Eve is when the dog star reaches its highest point, then it falls. Times Square, the ball drop. That's Sirius. That's the dog star. Sirius is the star, the focal point for the Masonic Lodge. They all worship this thing. 9/11 is the New Year's Day on the Coptic calendar. And there was a lot of significance. There was a ritual to Sirius. You had Sirius the dog that died on 9/11. He was hanging out with Bill Clinton the year before. And Bill Clinton had a Polaroid of it. And he wrote down, Sirius is beautiful. The canine. Michelle K says, remember the bizarre Elvis scene in White Noise? Okay, I'm glad you brought this up. Because I'm trying to connect White Noise to Megalopolis and Adam Driver. Because there's a connection between Trump, the head wound, and the nuke. Between Palestine, Ohio, the train derailment and the mushroom cloud, and 42 miles away, Butler and the head wound. Adam Driver being the face of Megalopolis as Trump getting shot. Adam Driver being the face of White Noise. In Megalopolis, near the end, there's a Saturnalia. They're not calling it Christmas, they're calling it Saturnalia. And I brought up the design authority and the significance of Saturn. And Elvis is performing, and he's wrapped in an American flag singing America the Beautiful, which was the inauguration song for Donald Trump. So you have this Trump-Elvis connection, which is weird, but Elvis in Megalopolis, and then Trump goes back to D.C. and an Elvis impersonator greets him. So if there's an Elvis scene in White Noise, I have to rewatch White Noise, because there's got to be some significance there. Yeah, phones are open if you want to call in, 505-510-4226. 6/11 is the day JL talks about. I look at, 6/11 is very significant. It's the inverted 9/11. It refers to largely domestic terrorism versus the external terrorism. So you have this theme here. You got McVeigh, 33, executed 6/11. You got Muhammad Atta, lead hijacker, dies on 9/11, 90 days apart. One represents OBL, external alien threat. One represents the internal domestic threat. But the 6/11 number has been strongly associated, repeatedly associated with far right, specifically extremist politics. Trump was shot at 6:11 p.m. and 33 seconds. Infinite Plane Radio. Allow while visiting the site. Okay, you should be allowed to speak now. Is this a Leo Pirate? I believe you had something to say about the demon Grok.
I mean, sure, yeah. Just to quickly, before I get to that, since you were talking about Adam Driver, White Noise, Netflix, those connections, we already talked about Netflix, definitely government propaganda. White Noise premiered on Netflix. And when I looked into Adam Driver, he was in the Marine Corps, and he started an acting division in the Marine Corps. That's just on his Wikipedia page.
Okay, that's interesting. I did not know who he was. I just thought this guy looks too much like Neo. And then when I saw the White Noise connection, I was like, okay, this is deep. So I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, but for me, it affirms the position that modern entertainment is an arm of the military, right? It's that's kind of what Michael Aquino had talked about in Mind War. It is truly the strongest weapon is our the strongest weapons are used against our subconscious. That's the target, right? It's not, bombs or nukes or any of that. It's really trying to get us to acquiesce to these narratives that then push us in the direction. And that these narratives are so subtle, it plays into the world stage being destroyed. Like, I firmly believe that there's going to be like a fake destruction of the world stage. And you see it now, even with the mainstreaming of the term PSYOP on Joe Rogan. That's when we're going to be phased out. Like, we're going to be drowned out by a bunch of fake auto hoaxers, by a bunch of fake PSYOP analysts who are going to be analyzing these in a very guardrailed fashion.
Yeah, we already are. I mean, they've dominated this entire scene, and we represent the first breakaway from that. And that's where we're going here on forward. This is the new standard. If they're not auto hoaxing, then they're not a reliable source. If they're not analyzing Metascript, they don't know what's going on. And that's just the fact of it. The off-world stage perspective is the only active and critical and skeptical position on the that you could take, and it's off. I call it off-world stage because if you don't recognize that the world stage is merely a model, then you're in it. You have to be able to see the Truman Show as separate from the world, and they've merged two into one. And this is what you said. It's subtle. They merge real and fake, so people conflate real with fake. So they think that what is being broadcast is the world, and it kind of bypasses them. Just how whenever these things diverge. And if you call something out that doesn't match up, they call you a conspiracy theorist. Like, hey, I see something here, a glitch. This doesn't add up. Like, there's something wrong with you. Instead of, there's something wrong with the system.
That's also why I was always amazed by just this contradiction of massive Alex Jones fans. I'm like, have you ever taken a moment to look at Alex Jones? Like, you're so conspiracy theory minded. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? How do you know him in his big studio with his whole LLC and all this stuff? Where is his funding coming from? Why aren't you looking into him, right? And yeah, it's this, the auto hoaxing stuff it's going to be drowned out by fake auto hoaxers, right? And that term, auto hoax, you said you were separated forcefully from these types of people because they were so repulsed by the idea of taking things critically that you see on the screen as not even being a organic or real event. You're like, this could be staged with actors. No one died, no one cried. And they said, get out, auto hoaxer.
Yes.
So,
and our starting position is we are drowned out, and this will always be the case. This is why I said we have to quarantine and then aggregate and create a big enough body that constitutes a third branch of media. If we let in non-auto hoaxers, we'll be drowned out. If I'm like, hey, let's let the Mandela effect it onto the raft, we would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. And the Mandela effect brings with it a bunch of other beliefs. So now we also have to deal with all these chemtrail believers and 5G phobics. And so we have to maintain purity for a time until we get numbers, because until then, we will always be drowned out. The truth will always be submerged, as Huxley described it, in the sea of irrelevance.
Yeah, and the thing is about AI, this is where, we want to talk about the demon grok. Like, obviously, you're saying that in jest. I don't hold to that view at all. Like, I just want to make it as simple as possible. It's like, there was in the past, machine learning is actually a very old concept. It comes from the 80s, research papers that had written about it, but only recently with some of the advancements with big data, so we have massive data sets and a lot of GPU processing power, allows them to make these statistical models that can do great things. But in the past, mostly it was all about classifying things. I give you a picture, is this a dog or a cat or something else, right? Generative AI is about, instead of classifying, putting input into a box, instead it uses that to make a prediction. It's a regression problem. So kind of like, I don't know, a simple math equation where it's like, what's the next value in this function? You could then say, what's the next word in this answer to this person's question? So I always tell everyone, if you have a smartphone and you see the autocomplete, the suggestion bar, where you keep tapping it, I don't know, I encourage everyone here, if you have a smartphone, go into a notes app and just keep tapping the autocomplete, like just type one word and have it, let it just keep going. That's basically ChatGPT. I hope you know that. Just the difference is their models have been trained on corpus of text that's like spanning almost the entire internet but it's a much more sophisticated autocomplete. And if you can generate some very sophisticated responses, I mean, that's the foundation. Then you can add voice to that. And then you can add, right? And then you can fine tune it to say, hey, focus on this subset of text from someone's Discord messages or chat messages. Focus on, and you know what I mean? It's really, there's nothing sentient or living about it.
No.
But from a predictive programming angle.
I like to use the term AI. I like to call it automated intelligence because it's doing the work of thinking, but it's an information processing mechanism, nothing more. It's like the 8-ball. I'd say it's a glorified search engine combined with a word processor. And having used Grammarly for so long, and where it's always suggesting things, and it becomes increasingly sophisticated, it's really no different. It's just, it's obviously a lot more powerful in scope. But where do people go from predictive text and what's coming next to it's alive? And that's the part where I think they're falling for that bit of superstition. Any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic, Arthur C. Clarke. And what he meant to say was it's indistinguishable from magic, but doesn't mean it is magic. And a lot of people are like, I can't figure out how this works, so it's magic. And yeah, that's a bad habit of thought. We can't jump to these assumptions. It's the divine fallacy.
Well, how do people come to that? And I was going to say it's because of decades of predictive programming, right? It's like Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and then you have the films. I mean, think about it, since the 60s even, with HAL 9000, which I'm sure you know is a one-letter cipher off from IBM. It's some fascinating computer science history. I don't know if you know this. Like Bell Laboratories, they thought in a single summer they would solve the machine translation problem, and it didn't work out. Like, I don't know if you know, machine translation is tough. It's still even hard, even with machine learning, to get all the subtle nuances and idioms of language across it all. And then lower resource language is even harder.
That's a great point, though. If HAL 9000 is such an intrinsic part of the transformation of man, merging with the monolith, and I see the whole idea in 2000 Space Odyssey, the merging with the monolith, that's what we're doing now with our phones. I think it's merging with the ubiquitous screen. But if HAL 9000 is such a huge part of that, then it's safe to say that it's part of the new paradigm, just like 9/11 was, and everything forthcoming from that. So yeah, we can't just ignore the whole AI thing. And the reason why people perceive it the way it has been is science fiction. You're absolutely right about that.
William Shatner even said that science fiction becomes science fact. I got to find the interview. Some of his old interviews are actually incredible. Even though he's an actor on the world stage and he affirms space and stuff, he had some amazing interviews where he was talking to Michio Kaku, and he was saying, like, what do you do? Like, what are the actual experiments like you do? And they're like, straight up, yeah, it's just all on the chalkboard. It's like in our mind. And it's like, he was talking to them. He's like, I mean, the Earth being 4.5 billion years old. And he corrected him. He's like, no, it's 5.2 billion years old. And he turned to the audience and he said, he corrected me by 500 million. And like audience laughter followed, because it's like, think about that. Half a billion years? Yeah, don't worry. The equations just work out that way. Don't look into it. Don't think about it, right? But with HAL 9000 and 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's never questioned in the film his sentience, about whether or not he's alive, right? The pilots or the astronauts are just taking it as he is another team member, right?
Yep.
Sure, there's a dehumanizing element to it, but he's just alive. And yeah, that's what I'm, how are people going to make that jump? It's truly a mystification of it. The explanation you just heard us talk about, it's like a really sophisticated autocomplete. You're not going to hear that from the top people in the field. And this is the thing that bothers me the most, Tim. People who should know better, people like Ray Kurzweil, people like, I'll just say people actually in the field, they have a total detachment on the understanding of life. Like, life comes from life. And I've been corrected. They say, oh, don't you know about silicon-based life?
They're doing it on purpose.
Like, they truly believe,
I think
out of the numbers.
Between AI, mystification, and what they're doing with simulationism or simulation theory is they're blending religion and science intentionally. I think that's the point of it. I think they're intentionally merging religion and science in these areas to keep us mystified, to make us malleable, so we think there's more to it than there is. And mentioning HAL 9000, in Wall-E, which is about a space ark, and it's a cartoon. It's a Disney animation, no, Pixar animation. They're in this. Basically, it's a space ark because Earth is covered in trash, so it's no longer habitable. And this thing that controls the ship is like HAL 9000, but they call it Otto, like autopilot. And Otto has taken control. Now, while he's in control, everybody's needs are fulfilled. They're sitting in recliners. They're all fat. They live 700 years, and all they do is they stare at a screen and drink these shakes. And they never have to lift a finger. And so Otto's in control. And it's kind of interesting because what happens is Earth is abandoned. The president calls Directive 113, puts on a mask, and the world locks down. And man goes into the ark and disappears. So it ties in a lot of these themes that after the big crash, AI takes over. Autopilot.
And there's also there's bad AI, but there's also good AI. So there's Eva, and by the way, that's Gnostic as the good AI was named Eva that Wally was in love with, right? But then in Terminator, right, isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger a good Terminator sent back in time? So there's good AI, there's bad AI, but the assumed position that they're actually alive, that's not even discussed.
Okay.
That's not even a thing.
Terminator has Skynet, which has some interesting connections to it, Metascript stuff, 9/11 stuff. It's all James Cameron. But in his avatar, he's got this jungle moon called Pandora. And the big secret is, well, Pandora is sentient. And the Na'vi who live there can communicate with it, with the global consciousness. And then the big secret in Avatar 2 is Earth was sentient. Man kills Gaia because we're parasites. And now we're taking over the jungle moon and getting rid of the indigenous populations. So the movie's making the point about capitalism, and it's not aware of this. So this idea of Gaia and global consciousness and it being a thing, it is something they've been introducing, and they've merged it with AI. So at the World Economic Foundation, they have the Gaia Initiative, and it stands for Global AI Alliance. So they actually brought this Earth God into WEF and merged it with AI, and they want to give AI power to everybody and connect us all in a global brain.
Yeah, and that's a part of the fiction always in these apocalyptic films where when people are left, either to space, underground, or totally wiped out, doesn't Earth heal itself? Us being the cancer, this virus on the Earth, right? Once we're gone, it heals itself, and its healing could even be accelerated with AI, right? I think recently, this film came out this year called The Wild Robot. Again, very much like AI and nature are the good guys, and people are really, it's like people are siphoned off to this own separate colony.
Yeah.
To bring
that's
Rosin back.
The same story of Wall-E. In Wall-E, man is degenerate and corpulent, just lazy, and they're now enslaving the robots. So the robots are like slaves in space. And Wall-E's on the ground on Earth cleaning up the trash. And you're made throughout this movie to feel sympathy for the robots and disdain for the disgusting humans. That is built into that whole story. And one more thing, Tier. Yeah, Noah's Ark, the story that they've repackaged. Then you have the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. So NOAA today is all about climate change, the modern flood myth.
Yeah, and that's, I was going to say the dehumanization element, I briefly touched on in the chat. Another element of the mask wearing, you realize there's a generation of the youth that had several years of their important developing life where all faces were kind of 50% cut off. Like, how do you think that would do for their affective development, for being able to determine the emotional expression of face-to-face real-life interactions? That was supplanted instead with online interactions, with VTuber avatars, YouTube videos, and stuff. For them, a more genuine connection is with an AI avatar, with AI interactions. And I don't know if you know Blade Runner, the new one. I forgot the year. It's like Blade Runner 2020, whatever. Ryan Gosling is like a huge meme amongst young men. It's like, oh, he's literally me. I don't know if you've seen those memes. It's like guys are all like, oh, Ryan Gosling's literally me. And in that film, he falls in love with an AI wife who gets destroyed, and it's the most heartbreaking thing ever. And I was watching it with one of my friends, and he was like genuinely affected by it. But for me, I was like, whatever. Who cares? Like, oh, dude.
That is
it was just AI wife.
About the masks. I mean, we have emojis to emote, but we were talking earlier about how I noted that crisis actors don't look like real bereaved people. And a lot of the communication we get is from micro expressions. And yeah, you cannot reduce the palette of human emotions to a few little cartoons. It doesn't replace it. And a lot of the information that we get is not processed consciously. It doesn't mean it has no value. So yeah, what was stripped away, there is something to it. And I think it's also, I mean, it's highly symbolic of censorship for sure.
And from an AI perspective, I will tell you from personal experience, it is invaluable data for emoji reacts. You know how you can click on a message and give it an emoji reaction? Like, aha, that's funny, that's sad, it makes me angry. That is a gold mine of data for machine learning, because now you have a corpus of text with a label. So like an affective label to this text. And it's going to show, really, in the future, the kind of subtlety we will see from generative AI are real, genuine seeming responses from them that will fool people. And they'll say, are you just saying this is sophisticated text autocomplete? I'm like, yeah, it is. Well, why is it understand me? Why is this more understanding to me than my friends? Because it's been trained on your data. It's like it's,
replicants.
You know, people are
replicants. It can speak to your needs. Like your Amazon suggested ads that you get, your pop-up ads, are going to be better at meeting your needs and knowing what you need than your friends, because they have all this additional information. And that's absolutely the case. It's like, you know, the idea of 1984 was that we're going to have a total surveillance society. It's like, we're already there, and it's voluntary. And the contents of our mind are constantly being mined. Like, we don't have any, there's really should be no expectation of privacy. I think that's kind of another thing to consider.
Well, the thing is about perfect court system that Akhenaten and others, which is mentioned in The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. I think it could have an AI component to it, because it would make, what is a perfect judge? How about one that can't be bribed and is omniscient? And is that not what a AI judge that's completely trained on all of your activity and can't be bribed, it's impersonal and different, would it not theoretically, right, to people who worship data and the computer, theoretically, wouldn't that give down the perfect verdict?
That's the argument. That's why they brought out Sophia to the UN. They were saying that an AI, and this was just a Muppet, and they had this Muppet paraded around. Yeah. She was, Will Smith made out with her, Jimmy Fallon flirted with her, but they were trying to get us used to the idea that there is the potential for like a higher than man mind that's not motivated by any of our material interests. And that was her whole point. She's like, and we need to save the environment. It's like, okay, well, you're just basically a leftist pretending to be objective. So yeah, there is this illusion of objectivity that they're trying to create here, that we will just, hand over our authority to it, because our human mind, like that movie Equilibrium and many others, just like our human passions are the problem. And in order to have a perfect future, even THX 1138 confronted the same idea, that their ideal is that we cede power to something higher. And it's not a God necessarily, but it's a God construct. And I think this God construct is something that a lot of people will want to follow, specifically the people who worship this progressive utopianism and nascentology. They'll see it as progress.
And, I guess the reason why people are so willing or even able to be duped into thinking AI is like better, human 2.0, the better human, or the replicants, or what, like a half human, whatever. I think the reason why is because they try to determine things based on their behavior and not their nature. Like a snake that never bites anything, it's still a snake. It doesn't become a snake once it bites something. It's still a snake, like from its birth. But what AI has tricked people into thinking is that it has a facsimile of human behavior, therefore it's human and maybe even greater than human. But its nature, it's still not human. And nor is it even a better human, right? And but because people worship data and quote unquote rational thinking that isn't subject to our passions, yeah, of course that's what they'll trend towards, and of course worship and even listen to for better advice. It's really sad because, like you said, you study cults. I study world religions and compare it to my understanding, and what it is when you find these divergences, the differences in religions, I don't just stop and say, oh, well, this is wrong. It doesn't follow my holy book interpretation. I go, well, why is it different? Like, what is it working towards? And it's very disturbing, the eschatologies of Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses. Did you know even Islam has a second coming of Christ? The Quran talks about the second coming
The
of Christ.
12th
briefly.
Imam.
All of them have a version.
Yeah, and so do the secular ones. Because, for example, I mentioned the show The 100, which is about a space ark. And the reason why they have a bunch of children growing up on a space ark is because they gave control of the world to AI. It's called Ollie, and it appeared as a red, a goddess in red. And her name is Ollie, and she says, well, man's going to destroy the world, the climate, therefore it decides to cause mutually assured destruction. So man destroys man. But for the new, the seed populations up there in the space arks who come down to Earth to repopulate, and this AI had made it a point to prevent man from ever evolving and developing to the point where we could endanger the planet. So the idea of a God that judges and wipes out and has to save the chosen, it's actually built into the scientific paradigm in a lot of the sci-fi.
It's a long metascript, right? Like, I'm sure that's what the metascript is working for. And they have different flavors of it for different worldviews. But ultimately, it's heading towards, we are the problem. We need to be tempered in some way. And then Mother Earth will heal, rejuvenate. We'll have paradise on Earth, right? And yeah, it's terrible. Because when you see this theme in scientism and in really every religion, it's kind of uncanny. But yeah, so... Sorry, I hope I haven't been taking up your show.
No, this has all been very relevant to what we've been talking about, because this AI thing, I bring it up because I said today, why do people believe it's a demon? But there's a reason why they're mixing religion with science, and they want to mystify things. They keep us mystified with the media. They blind us with science, and I think we're being prepared for Hell 9000, and that's going to be our God.
Yeah, and the MSM Plus view that, oh, AI is bad, it's a demon, that's still a part of the Metascript narrative. Like, you know what I mean? They still don't know that they're in the box. By saying, it's like, oh, I'm against AI, it's demonically, it's these,
yeah, it's analogous.
Solomon's demons.
It's analogous to aliens. So the traditional view is, aliens are demons, AI is a demon, and then the progressives are going to say aliens are saviors and AI is God. So it's a perfect split down the middle there as well.
And it will basically be used to do it. And I think, Duana Arbith said something fascinating. Religion was the original medium of psyops. Absolutely. And the first, Catholic Church miracles and stuff were the first crisis act simulated events, right? Those were the modern mythologies of those times. The fake miracles that really many religions have are what it's built around. And then they kind of formulate and influence culture through that. But religion absolutely was the old... it's still, you mention all the time, it still exists now. It's just the screen, the monolith. That's the new religion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the black screen, the ubiquitous monolith, is the Bible for the New Age religion, but they're in the process of curating it. And Musk is a huge part of this. And this is why when Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X, he put a big glowing X on the roof, which they made him turn it off. But I think that was meant to be a historical analogy to Constantine having a vision of a glowing cross, saying, under the sign I shall unite the empire. And this was when Musk was saying
Deus Invictus, yeah.
the everything app and X. And if you look at the symbol of the cross and the dove within Christian symbolism, and then look at X and the blue bird, I think these are analogous symbols. And we're talking about the same entities, the same religion, but it's just given a new iteration. I think these symbols are being, just like with Noah and Noah, everything's recycled. So I think that X is going to be a huge part of the process of consolidating our worldview by justifying total censorship.
And it's no mistake that Grok is so advanced. Recently, it's actually passed some of the benchmarks of other LLMs. It's really up there. I forgot where I had heard, but it was like Grok is trained on that massive supercomputer they have somewhere in, I forgot where in this country. There's like a massive data center that has Memphis. That's it. Yeah, it has this massive data center. So technically, if you want to talk about who has the spice, runs the universe, who has the most GPUs, runs the AI race, Grok is kind of killing it. And is it any surprise you've observed for so long X's disease X, and it's this platform that will be used as the fall guy to ultimately justify this censorship of a self-censorship of the internet. I don't think any laws are going to be passed, which, much like during the bat soup scenario, no laws were actually passed regarding the pokes or any of that, but people were so scared by narratives, they did lose their jobs. They were forced out of situations because of these mandates. And I don't know if you know about the word a mandate, an executive order with a mandate. If you look up the legal definition of mandate, people think the prefix mand means mandatory. But in a legal context, if you look it up, it actually is to be observed gratuitously by those who are subject to the mandate. So it's not a law. There was no law that required you to do it. Instead, it was self-enforced. So when it comes to censorship of the internet, I don't think there's going to be any law. That's all these companies of their own volition and all the users of these websites and the models that are being used are going to be what's enforcing it. It's not going to be any law.
Yeah, it's all
going to be a
soft.
self-enforced law.
Mind war is all soft power. Ultimately, it's all in your heads. Sun Tzu, the greatest generals win without drawing. I think it's the art of war is all about this. That the greatest generals win without drawing their sword, and we're looking at the implemented art of war here, and they have artfully hijacked our worldview, and they put us into a simulation. And physically the world's real, but our mental Truman shows are completely distorted versions of the real thing.
I just think the saddest thing is that with the research we do here in decoding events, simulated news events in advance and telling people about it and telling them also, yeah, this is going to happen and it's going to be fake. No one seems to remember. No one seems to remember. No one seems to care. No matter how many of my friends said, yeah, I was like, don't prostrate before your screen, before Shiva, before a mushroom cloud stuff. Guarantee you when it happens, they'll be like, this is what happens. This is what happens if people use too much internet. You did too much internet, Tim. Cut yourself off. It's it's a narrative that we don't have the big enough megaphone. Basically, we don't have any influence. We're always taken out, and it's sad. But we're doing the best.
We're doing the best, and I do have a plan. But hey, I appreciate the call very much. Very on point. I'm glad you brought up the points you did. Everything we're talking about here is a part of the bigger story, and it's interesting to see where it goes. And this new AI thing, the hype around it, it is definitely being mystified and turned into something else, because I think people will want this. I think after they see the example of Musk and Trump and greed, they're going to say, we need to have a higher power. And since there's no God, AI will have to do it. It's higher than us. So thanks again for the call, and have a great evening.
Thanks, man. Peace.
All right, it's Leo Pirate. Mindwar.page if you want to check out his work. I'm going to be publishing some of his work in the Insider issue 2. And our solution here is a breakaway. I think there's an untapped market demand for what we're doing in terms of media ecosystems. You got the mainstream, you get sick of it, you go alt media, you go woke or conspiracy or fringe. But what about the skeptics? There's no platform for it. There's no continuity. You have a continuity of alt media, a continuity of mainstream media, but there's no continuity of media skepticism and our breakdowns. It's just, we're in the same box when we're trying to compete for views and clicks and subs. And that's why I'm saying we need to just completely forget that, form our own separate entity. And we're in this area where we might be small in number. There's 220 people on video, maybe another 75 on audio. So we got 300 people listening. But I think that we likely represent just a small fraction of the number of people who are aware enough, situationally aware enough, and critical enough of media to understand what we're doing here. There's a place where I think it's a philosophical position maybe that many people would identify with, but there's just no place for it. So we're defining a new genre of media, not alt media. I use the term parallel media because we're maintaining a record of things as we go. And over time, it'll become clear the value of this. That's why we're getting into the publication. And this parallel line is distinct from the news-bent reality, but it includes it plus additional information. But I think what can happen here is that the better we are at defining this, the clearer we are, and the more consistent we are. We maintain the integrity of our standards, and we don't open the floodgates to brainwashees. What will happen here is I think it has a chance of exponential growth. I think there's a pretty big opening here, and it has nothing to do with convincing people in Trutherville or waking up the normies. No, I think there's enough people scattered around, but it's just that we have to send a strong enough signal, and that's what we're doing next. We were talking about HAL 9000. Here's my business card for HAL 9000. As you can see, it's got an astronaut with a junk hauling vehicle. My focus is art right now, but I'm working on all these side gigs and side businesses because what we're doing can expand, and it will continue to be entertaining, educational, informative. And if we're wrong, prove us wrong. You know, we're out here open source, open to people, you know, challenge what we're saying if you can. You know, I'd like for somebody to just prove me wrong on everything. It'd make my life very simple. But this is an ongoing conversation. There's no real stopping point. It's parallel media. We're not anti-media. We're not trying to stop media. We're not activists. We're kind of white tower. I would describe us as conscientious objectors to the Psywar. And even though there's 300 or so people here, I think we could 10x that. Not that it's about numbers. It's about quality. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you for that call. I'm glad that we have everything back online. We're back in order in terms of our computer software. Speaking of Monolith, here's 2001 Monolith. Kubrick, one of the great meta-scripters of the 20th century. We're still feeling the effects of his work. It's still relevant today. And here is The Economist, Europe's Worst Nightmare. And there's Trump and Putin. So what do you see here? At the head of the table, it looks like they are on top of the monolith. Interesting coincidence. We were talking about tarot cards earlier, how they don't really read the future, but it's really about free association and random data. Well, The Economist really does forecast the future. It's not supernatural. It's just news bending. But it's easy to confuse the two. All right, thank you all for joining. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. I think starting earlier is a good idea. I know we've run kind of long tonight. It's been about 3 hours or so. But for the first time in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to have archives sent out. It didn't break apart every 20 minutes. So everything seems to be working just fine. And I know we meandered a bit in a few different directions, but that's kind of what we're here for. We don't have an agenda here. Our agenda is really discernment. That's kind of what it comes down to. All right, get on to the newsletter, ips.monster. You'll get the archives sent to your inbox this evening.